Oh. Right, have we got the live stream started?
I can confirm it's my live, Chair. We are on.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'll welcome everybody to today's Scrutiny Management Board meeting. We have no emergency drills planned for the building. So in the event of a fire or other emergency, you should vacate the building in an orderly manner through the nearest available exit and make your way to the fire assembly point, which is in the car park behind us here. Recording of this meeting, live stream has started. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website as usual. The Council is streaming the meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording, and that recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has been concluded. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meeting, provided that it doesn't disturb the business of the meeting. We do not have any other attendees with us today. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, could I ask that members speak as clearly as possible and keep the background noise to a minimum and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. That includes the chair. Right. Hopefully that's dealt with that. We have some members of the board joining us remotely today. Do we? We don't. Excellent. Okay, we're all in the room. Do I have any apologies for absence?
Yes, we've received apologies from Councillor Bruce Baker, Councillor Bob Matthews, and Councillor Peter Stoddart, who's the cabinet member.
Can also confirm, Chair, we've had apologies from John Stone, Councillor John Stone.
Oh, right, okay. And do we have any substitutes?
Councillor Claire Davies is substituting for Councillor Bob Matthews.
Okay, do we have a substitute for Councillor James?
No one's been named.
Okay. Right. Do we have members of the committee have any declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda today? No? Okay. If anything comes to mind, just indicate and we'll deal with it in the room at the time. Item number 4, minutes. To approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of July 2023. Have we received any proposed corrections or issues of accuracy? No. Okay. Well, in that case, I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of July 2023 are agreed as a correct record. May I sign the minutes and approve them, please?
Could I just ask one thing? On the minutes, it says about having clear wording, and I've forgotten the terminology for it now. I just wondered whether we could put in there that we don't accept abbreviations for anything. I know Councillor Lester has brought it into full council, his concern about abbreviations in meetings that, you know, we all understand perhaps, but not everybody. So is there, I should have...
So we're going to try to avoid acronyms and abbreviations.
Yes. Would that be something we can add on there so that I know we did talk about it. Are we happy to do that? Chair?
Just a minute, it's a matter arising now.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll do it as a matter as arising from this one, and we'll just say going forward, and that any reports need to contain a glossary if there are particular terms that that need to be explained. Okay, I will sign the minutes at the end of the meeting, I think, in this case. Questions from members of the public. Do we have any written questions from members of the public?
We've received one question from a member of the public, which has been responded to, which is now on display on the council website. We've received a supplementary question in respect of that also, which I should read out now.
Okay,
It's from Mr. Mark Banks and it's delivered via email. In light of concerns regarding misleading service request statuses on the My Herefordshire site, could the council provide specific details on their planned strategies and timeline to address and rectify these inaccuracies, ensuring transparency and reliability for users? And we can give Mr. Banks a written response to that question, but we can't do it today, but one will be provided to him.
okay, good. Can members of the committee all receive a copy of the written response when it's issued?
Yes, it will be published.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Banks, for your question. Questions from members of council. Have we received any questions from members of council?
No questions.
Okay, right. Moving on then to item number 7, which was then published as the workforce strategy 2024 to 2027. Now, we're going to need to defer this item. I think it's important that we have the cabinet member present, particularly for a new 4-year strategy for the council. It's been brought forward a year, and unfortunately, Councillor Stoddart isn't able to be here today because he has a pre-arranged engagement which is clashing. So I have agreed that we defer this item until our meeting in a fortnight's time on the 21st of November. So we're going to do that, and Councillor Stoddart has rearranged his diary to make sure that he will be able to attend that meeting, and we can cover that item in detail there. I know it's an item that is important to us all, and particularly we've already received some queries from committee members. So we'll put those lines of inquiry forward to the 21st and cover those there when we can come back to this item. So apologies if anybody's watching online who has sort of logged in to hear that debate. Please come back in a fortnight's time. Item number 8, income and charging. So here we have an update on the approach to income and charging for the council, focusing on identifying opportunities to improve the council's service cost recovery position. Now, I think we're going to get 2 bites at this because we're going to get a bit of an update and some background information in this agenda item, covering work that has been being done for a while now, supported by outside consultants. And I believe Mr. Cook is going to be coming back on the 21st of November with a bit more detail about what is actually happening on income and charging and the approach that's being taken looking ahead to the budget for next year. So this is a scene setter and putting in perspective work that has been going on, but it's really an opportunity for the committee to become familiar with some of this work. And thank you very much, Mr. Cook, for being able to be here today and present this information. So if we can go through your slides over to you, and then we've got some lines of inquiry that the committee would like to run through.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. So thank you for the invitation to come and present this to you today. And as you said, Chair, we're more than happy to use this as a bit of an update on where we've got to in terms of our review of all fees and charges and service cost recovery, and then perhaps take away some of the questions you've got from today. And if you want more information, we can share that ahead of the meeting on the 21st in a couple of weeks' time. So the slides that have been attached to the agenda just really sort of set the scene in terms of the work that we've already been doing. And I'm happy to go through those, but I won't go through them in detail because I think they've been shared with the agenda. So I'll use the time sort of more for your questions and inquiries. I think that the key point of this is talking around when we've looked at our service cost recovery and fees and charges is to think about the services where we can and should charge for, as opposed to those that we provide as part of our sort of normal service as a council. And then looking at it from two aspects in terms of how much it costs to deliver that service, and then how much can be and should be recovered to provide that service as well. So it's not just a case of keep increasing the fees to match the cost of providing it, it's making sure that we are as efficient as we can be in delivering those services as well. So we're looking at it from both aspects to make sure we can reduce down the cost of providing any of those services, and then charging the right amount for it years ago, and thank you to the chair for sharing some of that background information ahead of the meeting as to where we are now and what work has been done. Certainly since I've been here just a short of 2 years now, one of the first things I was looking at was our traditional sort of fees and charges book, which councils traditionally would have as part of their budget setting, and it's normally a great tomb of lines of different fees and charges. And as an authority, we don't do that at the moment. We've got each of those are set across the different directorates, and we're responsible for setting our fees and charges as part of the budget setting. But there isn't one central place where that's held. But thanks to Rachel and her team as well in finance, we are reviewing that, and we're hoping to bring forward a proposal that will pull all those things together. And then in time, we can start to look at the sort of collective income generated from fees and charges, and then what the sort of inflationary rise means as part of the budget setting as well. So that's something that we can probably share with you at the next meeting as well. So that's just the context. And as I said, it's important that we make sure we talk around fees and charges as those areas where people sort of choose an additional service or need to take on an additional service, rather than it's a service that the council provides, such as emptying the bins on a regular basis. You know, these are things like bereavement services, parking, pest control, regulatory services, and some of those I'm sure you'll ask more questions about as well. So the first slide is just the overview, and the second slide is the list of items that we're going to cover. The third one is just really setting that context, which I've just gone through, and it's around making sure that we can compare ourselves to others. And I know there'll be some questions around how do we do that? Is it just comparable unitary authorities? Is it other county authorities? Because each of us have different charges and different costs in providing those services. So it's very difficult to compare. You can't say that our charges for certain services will be the same as a unitary Met or a city council, because there will be different costs of doing that. But some of them, things like bereavement services, are very clear in terms of the service you are providing, whether it's a cremation or a burial. We know exactly what our costs are compared to others, and there is quite a lot of information out there that we can use as comparators as well. So the next slide that's got the numbers 1 to 5 on it just shows the sort of key lines of inquiry. So this was carried out by our consultants for us, working across a wide range of service areas and looking at over 400 different fees and charges that we set. And that's where they started to use that comparators to say, well, actually, what are our fees and how do they compare to what others are doing? And we then looked at those in terms of where should we be charging more, where have we missed some opportunities, and where could we be looking at sort of even reducing some of our fees if they are out of line and we're overcharging for certain things. This produced over 200 opportunities, but again, we looked at these in terms of, are they right for us as an authority? Because sometimes it's just not the right thing to do, or we don't provide that service, or there's a reason why we're not doing that. And then there was a final list of up to 59 opportunities across the 3 sort of corporate directorates, and we've been working through that list in terms of where should we focus our attention and which areas would we come back with some opportunities going forward. And the next slide, again, this does relate back to the review that was carried out by the Task and Finish Group in 2012. It is around that full cost recovery to make sure that if we are providing a service that is an additional cost to the council, so it's not part of the council tax, it's something that we're providing either because we've chosen to or there is a demand for it, is to make sure that that's not costing the council taxpayer more as a result of us doing that, and the fees that we charge actually cover the cost of providing that service. And that can be things like, for example, our current garden waste service, where you'll be charged for a sack at the moment rather than the future service. Is making sure that the additional cost of providing the bags and the collection of that is recovered as part of that service. We're also then looking at some of the areas in sort of starting to look in the commercial area of services that we provide. And again, you might have some questions around some of the sort of consultancy or advisory services that we're looking to introduce or provide more support to residents and businesses, and where it is sort of the right thing to charge for those rather than it's part of what we do as a council. And some of those will be things like the planning service, and there's a difference between the application fee that you'll pay to submit your application, or would you pay for some application advice, which will actually give you some professional time with a planning officer who will give you the sort of a rough idea of what your application is looking like and where you might want to sort of make some amendments to. And it's using that professional service that we've got within the council to actually provide that sort of additional service to residents and businesses. The following slide, and again, so this sets out the comparators, and it gives a useful list of the different comparators that have been used by the consultants. And there is a footnote at the bottom of the page. This is the SIPFA nearest neighbours. So there's sort of a collection, or it previously called sort of a basket of similar authorities where we are providing that sort of similar demographic or some sort of connection that would mean that we should be compared for different things. It's not across the board, so not everything that they would have in that SIPFA basket would be identical, but it gives you a sort of at least a rough idea of who you could be compared to. And we can use that either to its fullest or not, depending on what we want to compare ourselves to. And as I said, some services, so looking at the list of things there, most of these are sort of unitary counties of some sort. So they are similar in their sort of makeup of, they will probably contain a town or a city within them, and then they've got some rural aspects as well. So that what makes them comparable. The next two slides just shows in some sort of overview, but in some detail of the different areas that they identified where we are either lower or higher than some of those comparatives and some of our charges. Again, this doesn't give you the detail of every charge within those services, but it gives a rough idea as to where we might be looking at in terms of why are we charging less than some of those councils, and what, is it because we provide a slightly different service, or is it that it just costs them slightly more, they're recovering more? And again, there's lots more detail that we're looking through each of those in turn. And then they sort of broke that down to the final slide in terms of those different categories. They started to focus on some of the areas where these are additional services that we provide, so trade waste, the bereavement services, taxi licensing, building control. Some of these have to be at cost anyway, so licensing is, the fees are set by government, and you can't be more than the cost of providing those services. Other areas, like building control, again, must be a fully costed service we provide, and that's open. You can go to other professional commercial organisations to get some of those services as well. So that's where we need to compare ourselves to the market as well. And then there's a sort of a nice picture of a funnel, which was the progress and the work that we went through just to sort of start to work through that really big list of 400 sort of different service areas, narrowing it down to go through the detail as to where we could really focus and where the differences are. And then some of those sort of opportunity testing and prioritisation, which are the ones where it just doesn't feel right based on the data that we've seen. Why are we charging less than others, or slightly more in some occasions? And then to focus on those business cases, and there's some detail on the business cases that we pulled together afterwards. The next slide just covers off some of those business cases. There was a fifth one as a priority area. It wasn't actually a business case. One of the areas that was identified was during the COVID lockdown, we ceased charging for people who were late to return the library books, for obvious reasons, because they couldn't return them at that time. And that hasn't been switched back on again. And when we looked at it, we said, well, you don't need a business case to tell you that's what you should do. It's fairly clear that if we were doing it before, we need to know that the market's changed, because people's sort of lending habits have changed. And probably, I think previously, that some of the fines were more around DVDs and videos rather than books. And that market's probably changed a bit since lockdown, and people aren't going to the library to hire out those things. So we just said we don't need a full business case to do that. We can just actually look at it again. If it's still right to do it, then switch that back on. The other four that are listed on the slides were ones that we said actually, with a bit of work, we could do those now. So the council lottery, and I'll leave these for sort of questions, because you might have more questions to ask of me anyway. Advertising on our assets, aligning parking charges, and I've used that wording in terms of that's just where we've tried to look at some of the gaps where we've just not introduced charges, or some areas we're not charging the same in all aspects, whether it's the city or the town. And then the community toilet scheme, which again I think has been looked at previously. This is around working with businesses in the towns and the city centre to provide an additional service in terms of toilets, and what that could mean in terms of sort of either income or sponsorship, or how we could sort of provide a better provision going forward. So as I said in the introduction, there currently isn't one version of all those fees and charges. Each directorate and each service has got their own that they've been monitoring and managing. But we are now looking to bring those in together, and we can provide that as part of the budget setting. We are still going through quite a lot of data in terms of which services and which areas the charges are slightly lower, but also thinking about what's the inflationary rise on this as well. So, for example, in bereavement services, we've traditionally gone for a standard inflationary rise, but the services are doing a lot of work in terms of what does the market tell us as well. So, a 5 or 10% increase on a burial fee might seem quite a lot in some areas, but compared to bereavement services in Ludlow or others, we need to make sure that we don't sort of outprice ourselves from that market as well, to make sure that people still use us. We feel comfortable in a majority of those because we provide a really good service. And I would say that as one of mine, but it's an area where people traditionally welcome what we provide in these services. That doesn't mean we're going to overcharge on them, but it does mean that we know that we've got people who would use us because they know that we provide the service that they want. The final bullet point there is just to note, so audit and governance looked at in-year increases as part of their report a couple of weeks ago. And I think that was just confirming the governance process for to allow the delegation of the increases in year to corporate directors in consultation with the relevant members and cabinet members. So it's just to note that there is that opportunity that if we feel that we're out of line during the year for some reason, because costs have escalated, and we've seen that in recent months, then there is that governance process to allow us to do that. And I think then in summary, I mean, there has been a lot of work, as you'll see from, it's not shared in the detail, but the sort of presentation just shows that it has been a detailed review of all of our current service, all of our charges. We're now looking in terms of how we deliver those 5 business cases in this year. Some of them will have a longer lead-in time, the longer list of opportunities from when they'll be sort of brought in line, both in terms of before March next year and then into next year as well. I've just put in there just around the directorate transformation for my own directorate. So again, I've mentioned this to members in various different conversations that we do provide a lot of professional services. And we traditionally provide those because that's what we do. And I think we can all see that the market has changed. And I've used this probably to bore people too many times, but I'll use it once more now. So when I was at my previous authority, one of the areas that we looked at was in terms of the food inspection team. And we were originally criticised by the Food Standards Agency by our approach. But what we would do when a new food business was opening, we would go along when they booked their time to go and inspect them to see where they are on the 5-star rating. And if it was clear that they were in that sort of 3, 4, nearly 5-star from the first inspection, it's far better for us in the economy to work with them to get to that 5-star rating, because we want to know that our residents and visitors are getting the best service possible, and then we've got the best offer in terms of all the different restaurants and bars and places people will go. So we realised that the market was saying to us, well, actually, rather than just go along and inspect and say you're 3-star and we'll come back next year and that's it, you're 3-star, isn't it better to work with that organisation and that business to get them to 4 or 5-star if they want to get there? Now, that's not right that the council does that for free. You pay your fee for your 5-star inspection, but actually we have the professional services and the officers who can provide that consultancy basis. So you need to separate it. You can't have the same person offering advice and then inspecting them, because that's a slight sort of mismatch of professionalism. But you can, within the team, you can have somebody go out and offer that advice and work with them, and then somebody else will do the inspection. And it's a bit like pre-planning applications, but it's just seeing that across many of our different services. And you can apply that to noise inspections, some of our regulatory services and training standards. There's a whole sort of series of professional services that we provide. Now, that can't distract from what we do as our day-to-day jobs, but it should be seen as where people want to buy services from us. They will go to someone else to do it, but why can't the council do it? And yeah, we shouldn't be doing these things at risk. We shouldn't be suddenly setting up companies that do all these things, but actually as a trade and accountant doing things differently, then that's the way I think that we should be going in terms of providing those professional services. So as my part of my direct contribution, we're challenging that at every level to say, well, actually, where are those areas where we could be providing a professional service? And I think actually the officers and the teams are also welcoming that as well, because it adds something different to your role as well. You're not just inspecting and doing those things and guiding people. You can actually provide within your professional expertise, you can provide those additional services as well. So we're looking at a number of those as well, just in terms of where would the market be? What sort of thing would people say? Well, actually, for half a day's consultancy, we'd happily buy that from the council, and that should be separated in terms of our fees and charges. So we're doing that work as well. It sort of links to the review that we've already done, but I think it's just an area that we need to focus on, particularly in my directorate that provide those services. And as you said, Chair, we're happy to take questions today, but more than happy to come back in a couple of weeks' time if there's any sort of specific areas you wanted to do a bit more of a deeper dive next time round.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to remind the committee, this is part of the Scrutiny Management Board's work on financial matters around the development of the budget for next year. So some of the lines of inquiry really are putting the work that's going on now in context with the work that was done 10 years ago and what's happened in the meantime. And then, looking at where we are now and what contribution income and charging might make to the overall budget, where we haven't done charges previously. We can't start sooner than now, but it is a case, as Mr. Cook has said, of taking a balanced view on whether it's the right thing to do, and if so, how we go about doing it. So thank you very much for talking us through those slides, Mr. Cook, and if we can approach the lines of inquiry that we've got around that. I know you are given you prior sight of those, so hopefully nothing that is going to come as a surprise, but hopefully you can elaborate on some of the areas of interest that we've got in. So, Councillor Chance, if I could ask you to start.
Sure, and Chair, can I just, there's something I want to pick up on in response to what Ross was saying there. Can I do that now, or? Yeah.
Yes, if it fits in with the line of inquiry, yeah, that would be great.
Well, not very directly, but I'll take the liberty of doing it.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. So, Ross, you talked at the end there about the point about food service inspections, which I have heard you talk about before, and I confess it was one of the things that really came to my mind when I was reading this, because it didn't jump out. I could see that it was possibly under that very last thing, but I was a bit surprised because right early in the presentation, there's a thing about the 4 types of fees and charges, and one of them is development of new services. And yet when we kind of come through the slides and we get to the point about the business cases, the 4.5 business cases, it's really hard for me to see how they actually arise out of the previous slides, particularly the 2 slides with the coloured arrows on the side and the matrices. I mean, I really want to look at much more detail. To me, they're not really clear, and I've got loads of detailed questions about them. I think it would be useful to look at the numbers to understand that. But taking the point that service you just talked about, if we've done this whole review and we already, presumably you go in saying, how about doing this? We know it works elsewhere. Why hasn't that actually fallen out of this process as something that could have a business case?
So there was 2 different sort of lines of inquiry in terms of the review that the consultants were doing for us. And we were quite clear in that some of these commercial ones we were already doing, so we didn't need them to spend time to go off and research what others were doing, because we already have our own ideas and where they're coming forward. So as part of my work with them, I was saying exactly the same stories and saying, I don't need you to tell me again that that's what we should be doing. So, I wanted them to focus on the areas where they are specific fees and charges. as opposed to commercialisation. So they've given us some feedback in terms of the commercial opportunities, but the ones where we've said no, they're already on our list to do, please don't tell us again, because we know that's what we're going to do. The business cases were really around those where they could be implemented fairly quickly. As always, it's never quite as quickly as we want it to be, but they were areas where we'd already seen that, you know, within the authority, people were saying, yeah, that's the sort of thing we want to do, and the council lottery was one of those. So it's just that they were able to give the full business case for us to implement it, and you know, the resource around padding those business cases out to show how it could be implemented and what the work could be done, as opposed to the longer list of opportunities that probably need a bit more time to spend on. So they were probably seen as the sort of quick wins in terms of we could do it now, but they might take a bit of time just to sort of implement them over the next sort of few months.
Okay, thank you. So to return to line of questioning number one, so kind of going back to the beginning, Scrutiny looked at fees and charging back in late 2011, came up with a bunch of recommendations. They were adopted by Cabinet in 2012.
Yeah.
So what's happened about implementing those recommendations in the last, 11 years, essentially?
Yeah, and I won't say every time in that I wasn't here 10 years ago, but I'll get away with it once, hopefully.
There must be somebody who was 10
and,
years ago.
And I think I've looked back at the main recommendations that were made there, and I would say that most of them are there. I think what we probably haven't done well is keep up with the pace of change. So fees and charges have changed over that period of time. I think the fact that we haven't got that central control over but the sort of database or collection of all the fees and charges probably hasn't helped, because it's been sort of devolved across the different services and not bringing it together. You don't get that collective view of where we are in terms of just that comparison. I can't say for certain, but I don't think we've done this sort of annual or biannual review of where we are compared to others. And for me, that's one of the things that we need to make sure that we do, so that it doesn't just keep falling backwards. Decisions will be taken each year in terms of the inflationary increase, and there'll be local reasons as to why we've chosen a figure that might be different to others. So they're the ones where we might have just dropped slightly below others in terms of what we're charging. Or it could be actually that our costs have increased and we just haven't increased the fees to match those as well. And I think that's the piece of work that we still need to do in terms of, it's okay to increase things, as I said, but equally we want to make sure that our costs of delivering those services aren't just inflating themselves at the same pace, and we need to keep those costs down.
Okay, so you've identified a couple of sort of barriers to, making sure that we're keeping on top of full cost recovery, essentially, and fees and charges. One of which is the lack of basically a kind of an overall database of it all. You talked about that in your presentation, but you talked about it as something that still isn't there. So at what point in this process are you going to get the database? Because now you're talking about it as like the starting point, really, bringing it all together. And from a sort of layperson's perspective, how difficult is it to construct one spreadsheet that's got all of this information in it?
And it's not as difficult as it should be. No, I was wrong, Marie.
More difficult than
That's the one.
not as easy as it should be.
And as I said, thanks to Rachel's team, that new starters there as well have also come in and helped us to do this. So we've already and a very quick analysis of comparators, and I've used my previous authority. We're just looking at their complete list of fees and charges and dovetailing what we currently charge to those anyway. So the list is out there. Every council provides a lot of the same services, so it doesn't take long just to borrow one of those lists and add our fees and charges to it, and then see where the gaps are and where the differences are. So that's happening, and I wouldn't put a time on it at this stage, but it's not far off completing, so that we can send that back out to all the services and say, is there anything missing in here, or are there things that we should be taking out because we don't provide those services?
So when you come back to scrutiny in 2 weeks' time, you can't tell us that you'll have that list.
I think there are lists in various parts of the organisation at the moment. What we don't have is one combined list. But what I would say is the list will then be a tool to be able to monitor ongoing uplifts, but it doesn't prevent this work from happening in its current format. It's not the list isn't the driver for the work. The list will be a useful management tool following this work to collate and have one single source of the truth that we can then benchmark and review annually in one single source.
Thanks, Rachel. I understand, but I'm coming at this, I'm pushing on this because Ross basically said this is the binding constraint to the implementation of the recommendations from 10 years ago. Basically.
I wouldn't say it's a constraint. I think for me coming in new, not having that as one sort of collective source doesn't help, because I can't then see, if we are going evenly across the inflationary rises, or if things are sort of stepped out of line from other areas. So I'm sure when we put it all together, it won't tell us anything different in terms of where our fees and charges are, because that's what the review's done. Rachel said it would just provide that one sort of central source for the information to be reviewed, and then we can just monitor that year on year.
Okay, so and just to push on a little bit on this finally, so when we come back to this in 2 weeks' time, are we going to be able to have more information on that? And in particular, are we going to be able to get a bit more of a sense of the sort of the scale of, like, some of we've got little arrows that say this is above average or below average, but no indication of whether that's like, you could potentially get an extra 100 grand a year if you sort this out, or you might potentially get an extra 50p. It feels like that's really crucial information as well.
Yeah, and that's where the long list of opportunities we're looking at to see how much we are out of line, because you're right, it might only be 10 pence on a charge and we only sell 20 of them.
Yeah.
Or it might be £100 and we sell a lot more of them. So that's the analysis we currently do to see, both in terms of any in-year increases, but also for future years, and what the increase in income would be.
When will that be ready?
Well, we should be in a better position in 2 weeks' time. Probably not to release a part of the papers in less than a week's time. But certainly as part of the update we can provide next time.
Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Stark.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ross, for your presentation. I'm not going to go through these lines of inquiry exactly as they're set on the paper, because you've covered some of it in terms of your presentation. I think you started by saying not all the comparators are unitary authorities. Is that right?
I don't know if I said that, but they are.
They are all unitary authorities, are they? In that case,
Ireland.
Which one, sorry?
Northern Ireland. Anyway.
we're leaving that to one side, Ross. Okay.
Oh, Northumberland. That's my eyesight. Oh, I'm getting old.
Yeah, so on page 46 in the pack,
Right.
that's where the
We also had a set of comparators in 2010-11. I haven't got it in front of me, unfortunately. Have the comparators changed much between the two sets to start with, Ross? Did PwC give you a justification for doing so?
I think there certainly were the ones on the list that I've been shown from 2011. Most of them are on both. As I said, it's part of the SIPFA benchmarking collection of authorities. Rachel can explain what that definition is, but it's a standard that's
It's a standard list.
Yeah.
Does anyone within the council look at that list and reassure themselves that they're still relevant to being compared with Herefordshire today? Because we've obviously probably changed in 12 years as they would have done. I just wondered, I mean, I can understand the consultants presenting it to you, but I'm trying to get at whether there's a process of reassurance by which you reassure yourselves that those comparators are the right ones to be looking at.
So for the purposes of this slide information, those neighbours have been identified as statistical neighbours based on the 21-22 revenue outturn figures that have been submitted to government. So those outline our income and expenditure on a line-by-line basis, and that's the data set that has been used to determine that these are our.
So the underlying rationale behind it is that.
Yeah, and that takes into account social and economic factors as well within that set of statistical data.
So if that's the case then, and we're looking at them broadly as we are, is anyone trying to get underneath that to see why certain of our comparators have set the fees and incomes they have? But there could be all sorts of reasons why they might be
Yeah.
doing that.
And I think that's part of this exercise, it's to unpick each of the opportunities that have been identified as opportunities to understand whether they are relevant in Herefordshire, whether it's achievable in Herefordshire, knowing what we know about the local environment and the residents here. Also in the Grant Thornton Value for Money opinion report, they have a look at our income and expenditure against our statistical and geographical neighbours. And we've done a sense check to review this information with that information to see whether it's drawing out the same conclusions in terms of the areas where we are under recovering perhaps.
But there could be reasons why they might be setting their fees at a higher level, why we might not.
Yeah, and we'd use that understanding to inform the next stage
Yeah.
of the work as to whether it's something we could proceed with.
Okay, because Chair, what I'm trying to get at is this proposition that we go for full cost recovery, if that is the case. And I'm just trying to tease out whether that would be flat across the board, because I can understand if there's a certain service we're providing to a certain group that for one reason or another are a vulnerable group, for example, we might want to provide that service at below cost. And I'm just trying to get at whether we've got evidence of that with the comparators doing that as well. Because it seems to me just having a comparison where you say we're lower than that one, but higher than that one, and then just bring everything to the middle.
Yeah.
Seems to lose a lot of the subtlety otherwise about how we set fees.
It does, but and that's why I said it's important that we still look at the actual cost of providing the service. So, for example, I mean, just picking up some of the lists there. So, if you think of the cost of hiring a park in the middle of Bath, for a large event or community event, they will have their charges as to how much that would cost them as an authority to provide that. Similarly, we would do the same in our area, and they won't be comparable costs. And then you might think about, well, do you provide it at a slightly offset, a lower rate for community groups compared to professional organisations? So it gives you a level, and it makes you think about, well, are we undercharging or are we too expensive? So you can do that, but you still need to look at the local market and understand the differences in why we charge something and others might not.
And from this exercise, I know Rachel, you said there's a rationale behind it, which is useful to know. Will we be presenting to Cabinet or to the full council? Here's what a comparison would look like if we were just basically looking across these comparators in terms of full cost recovery. But here's what we might want to do in Herefordshire, which is different from that. So we end up with a sort of comparison like that, where we will have reasons for maybe not necessarily charging at the same rate.
Yeah, but I don't think we would ever present it in that way, because at the end, we just want to say, here's the cost of providing the service. We know what the market is saying elsewhere, and this is the right fee for us. So I don't think we'd ever present a report that goes back to say the X council charges so much for its whatever service, and we charge Y. It's just what is the right fee. But we've got the backing up the data is there to back up the sort of rationale as to what we're saying.
So we could actually, on a full cost recovery position, actually charge a higher fee than, say, a comparator.
Yeah.
Because they might be more efficient, or they might not have the same challenges in terms of reality in that.
And then it's a question of, is it, because not all of that income will be ring fenced, but as an authority, you can choose to do that. So, for example, you might charge more than it costs for hiring a park for events. You might charge slightly more than it really costs you, but that money goes back into maintaining the park. It's around that business catering and service area.
So, Chair, as far as the committee is concerned, I think the comparator sort of exercise is just that. It's a benchmark. I just think we shouldn't be too carried away by literally looking across and saying if they charge more, we should charge the same amount. That's a conclusion I've come to from looking at this.
Well, it sounds like the officers are being rather more nuanced in the way that they're looking at,
that's right,
at that. And it looks like the comparator council group has changed from 10 years ago. And you would expect that, because what fitted the way we looked 10 years ago won't necessarily be a complete match, but some of them are the same. Councillor Cornthwaite, you wanted to come in on the back of that line of questioning.
I just wondered, I wanted to ask about the people who've carried out the survey, or was that a one-off fee? Is it something that's ongoing? And can we make sure that we recover everything we've spent on having that survey carried out by implementing things that have happened on the report?
Yeah, so the whole council transformation programme is based on that sort of return on that investment. So yeah, anything that we provide, we've sort of funded through consultants to do the work. The rationale is that we will get that repaid as part of the transformation. So the fees and charges, service cost recovery has got itself set a target, you know, to pay for the cost of that provision and then the increased income as well.
And do we know what that figure is?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right now, I'm going to jump in with a few questions now. Back in 2012, PricewaterhouseCoopers, who are the consultants that we worked with then and we're working with now on this, were provided advice to the council on areas where increased revenue was possible to be delivered. And back then, their suggestions were adult services, car parking, advertising and sponsorship, children's services, bereavement services, registration services, and environmental health fees and charges. So the areas that are now being recommended by PwC as showing potential are very similar to those that they identified back in 2012. So my questions around that are, have PwC in undertaking this work now made any reference to the work that they did for us back in 2012? Have they reviewed the actions taken by the council to deliver on their previous advice and provided comment on any lessons learned in terms of why perhaps we didn't take that forward at pace?
So I think the short answer is no. There hasn't been any reference back to 2012. The review that they were asked to carry out was based on current service costs and the fees and charges. So whether it's because the question wasn't asked to compare how we done compared to what you asked or you suggested 10 years ago, but it was very much around what's the market charging now and what's our fees in terms of comparison to that.
Okay. So have PwC explored why the council remains behind comparators in recovering costs in some of these service areas 10 years down the line?
They haven't, but I think, you know, having been made aware of that review, I think we can probably do that comparison in terms of what were we told 10 years ago. I mean, we can't remedy that, but we can at least see, did we take sort of heed of that advice at that time? Again, it might have been that decisions have just been taken just to keep our costs slightly lower than others. That, yeah, the sort of history behind that won't necessarily be easy to sort of pull out, but we can at least see what advice was given 10 years ago and whether we've moved those fees forward or whether they've just been there and then they've slipped back down again.
Okay. So I mean, for me, I'm kind of keen to understand what they're recommending in terms of the service areas that we could be looking at for either for cost recovery or developing some further income streams. What's changed now, and how are we to be assured that the income that has not previously been delivered will be able to be delivered now?
So I think that the difference is that we all see the market different to how we might have 10 years ago as well. Yeah, I think the sort of line of questioning shows that members are very sort of aware of service cost recovery and the fact that we are talking around services that are additional to what we would be normally providing. So if we are providing it, it shouldn't be at a cost to the sort of general council taxpayer. Saying that, there will still be policy decisions on which areas we will charge more or less for. So, you know, even with a long list of opportunities, there'll be somewhere, yeah, that we will see that others are doing it, and we will say that's not right for here, and we will just need to take those decisions, and yeah, we can show the rationale behind that. I mean, some of the examples of that would be things like we were shown an example in Manchester where they've introduced a sort of bedroom tax for hotels. It's it's an additional business rates as such, where it's a sort of voluntary scheme, but the hotel sort of even an economy have signed up to it and say, yeah, we're happy to pay into that, knowing that that money is ring fenced back into the economy that supports, whether it's sort of street pastors and wardens and that sort of thing to keep people safe in the evenings. That's just not right for our economy at this moment in time. So there will be a number where we've just said they are good ideas, but they're just not right for us. So we need to sort of cross those off the list, but then really focus on the ones where we should be making those decisions in terms of what's the right charging policy.
Okay. And yeah, I'd like to back up the points that Councillor Chowns was making about understanding the scale of the income that where or the opportunities that we're looking at here, and how we are balancing out quick wins versus big wins. I think a bit more information on that would be helpful for the committee to understand in the context of what's being proposed for the budget, at least in terms of early projects that are being taken forward. Thank you, Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so following on the example of the other chairs, I'm going to ask for some context around the questions around the opportunities that we're looking at. So trying to get an understanding of the scale of this piece of work for the budget. On page 43, you're talking about the amount that can be recovered, and in our figures that we represent on the website as to where our money comes from, it says the remaining 273 million, or only 6% of our income, is funded by business rates, government grants, and charging for some services. So what actually is in context of what we're looking at, how much money in the budget are these services? So that was one of the things which kind of fits in about how much additional income cost savings are forecast to come from these payments. So presumably we've got a bench figure of what we know, some of which is sort of shown on the website, and how much are we actually forecasting to make a change on that. And so when we're looking at those over 200 opportunities that have been identified, this is quite a long list, and then we're talking about 59, not a huge amount of those, and then obviously we've got 4 now because we talked about the 5th one being libraries. Of 200 down to 59 down to 4, it seems like we're almost screening stuff out rather than screening stuff in, and that's how it feels to me when I look at these figures and these opportunities. So I'm just wondering, are these the best? Are they the only ones we're going to be working on? Is that long list of 59 going to be taken forward?
So yeah, I mean the long list of 200 opportunities, and I just gave one as an example around the sort of the evening economy and a bedroom tax as such. So there were a number of those where just across the country people are charging or providing different services, and we will have either decided previously that we don't provide that service, or it's an area that just doesn't work for us. So we can share a longer list of those. It's safe to say that nothing is off the list until it's been absolutely clarified. We are just not going to introduce that charge or make that change. And I'm challenged on that on a regular basis to make sure that we haven't just said, oh, that feels a bit too difficult. Yeah, there will be a rationale behind everyone to say it will not be introduced in that. As I said, that's one example. I was trying to think of a similar one. I think we touched on things like the workplace parking levy, and whether that's right for the economy as well. So in some cities, think Nottingham are probably the one that's done it to its fullest around, you know, the sort of private car parks are part of offices and things, that they've introduced that parking levy. Others have just said the economy can't cope with that. You know, if you started to introduce that sort of levy, then your offices would close and they would move out of town or to different areas, and so it has to be balanced out as to whether it's the right thing to do or not. So there's a number of those where there's either going to be a policy decision as to do we want to do it or not, and then the decision on what level they could be. So we can go into those details, and I think it just goes back to it's almost breaking down that 200 to the sort of top. 59 is a strange number, but you know, they're the ones where, in theory, they could either be something we already charge for, and we could charge more for it, or an opportunity around that. I think the list is probably, it sounds bigger than it really is, because some of it will be, when you look at parking, yeah, there's probably umpteenth different types of parking charge that we could introduce. You know, it's not just your standard off-street parking charge. There'd be all sorts of, whether it's, you know, residence parking permits or business permits, or, you know, various different elements that we could be looking at. So trying to just sort of group those into one area and say, okay, well, parking, for example, we will look at every aspect of parking charge and, you know, are we charging the right things? Is it the right area? Do we look at different zones in different areas and sort of applying a sort of a rationale behind all of those fees in different areas?
Thank you. And just a couple of questions more. So one again around context in terms of the amount of money, and also the spread across the directorates. There's this idea that, are we taking kind of one Herefordshire approach to this, so that when we look at additional fees that we could be charging in planning, are we hooking that up something like, say, building control, so that somebody who is actually developing the site can, particularly in the market towns where they are going to be retro developing something that's always already there most of the time. You know, are they getting value for money? Are we getting value for money from the advice that we're giving through planning and through ancillary services that they need in order to do that? And that comes back again, you know, so when we're looking at these things, we're not just coming up with lists of, like we have here, of individual standalone opportunities, that we are actually maximising those opportunities across the board. And then my final question really is, in terms of what we're looking at right now, have the savings and the income increases that are being identified in these business cases being included in the budget for 2023-2024, i.e. for this financial year, or are they coming forward for the next financial year?
Okay, so taking that last one first, so none of these proposals are built into this current year, but that doesn't mean that we're not looking at whether, if they can be introduced, can they offset any of the current sort of projected overspend across the whole authority. So yeah, if we can make the change now and it's right to do it, then we will look to do that before the year ends. The first question around the sort of overall income, I don't know if Rachel can help, or whether that's a bit more detail we need to come back in, because you're talking around the whole sort of income for the council in terms of council tax, business rates and fees and charges. So perhaps that's when we can bring back the sort of breakdown in terms of that, because the fees and charges will be a very small percentage of that. And so the income, additional income we're talking
That
is
gives us a context of what we're looking at here. Yeah.
22 million in total income from 22 million from fees and charges, and that will be, as you say, a lot of that will be around planning, not 20 million round worth, but a lot of those sort of traded services and whether it's licensing, whether it's planning, building control, those sorts of things. And then your middle question around how do we sort of get the best value for everyone? Interesting, we just started to do some sort of drop-in sessions for businesses and residents, mainly focused around economic development, but we're starting to sort of set up some one-stop shops mainly in the atrium here at Plough Lane, where we were just trying to see how we can promote it more. But if somebody is looking at a building of some sort, we can have a few officers sat around and actually they can almost go, okay, well, this is what I do for planning permission, this is what I do for building control, this is what else I need to know if it's a food business I want to set up. So we can almost sort of provide that conveyor belt of advice in one place so that people can come and get all of the advice and know everything that they need to know in terms of process and fees and applications. Because I think that's a really positive way of actually supporting people to know what they're doing, because I'm sure your questions around that fact that people might have thought, well, they've got planning permission, that's great, I can go off and do it. And then suddenly they find, oh, actually, you need to get your building control fees paid as well. So we've got that duty to make sure people understand that before they start, but equally making sure that the sort of income and the process is as smooth as possible as well.
Councillor Cornthwaite, were you indicating, and then Councillor Williams?
Yes, could I just, thank you, Chair, could I just pick up on advertising on highway assets? And I wonder, first I would just like some clarification of what does that actually mean? And then just wondered where my own irritant is about people will advertise on lampposts and all things around the city for their events, but then they forget to take them down. And I just wondered if that was not somewhere we could have an income from fining people for failing to take down their out-of-date posters.
Yeah. So there's sort of three aspects to the question really. Advertising on lampposts is fly posting, so it's illegal. And so we quite regularly with the teams will go out and just remove those signs that shouldn't be there. I mean, technically they're a hazard because people will be reading them as they're driving along, and
Exactly.
that's why they shouldn't be there in the first place. And you can fine people for doing it. There is a part of a fixed penalty notice you can issue for people who sort of persistently do it. In the right place and the right time, you could encourage it. So there are other areas I've seen where there will be certain areas just off the highway where you could almost use that space for advertising of events. And if it's in a controlled and safe environment, then naturally that's a good place to look at some income as well. So we need to balance that out in terms of a sort of approach where we say it's not right. And I'm keen on our team that they often go out with clippers in hand and they will be taking down a series of signs that shouldn't be put up. Signs on there. What we are proposing is that we look at all of our assets across the county. So mainly it will be highway assets, but there owned anyway. There are pre-existing relationships with Hereford in Bloom, so they've got sort of authority to do some of that as well. So we're just working through what it would look like. The business case that came forward from PwC was around us then going to market and doing that. My proposal is that actually we go to market to appoint somebody to do it for us. It's not an expertise that we've got, and I wouldn't want teams sort of ringing around different companies trying to sell advertising space. But there are lots of companies out there who do that as their sort of primary business. They will take a percentage of the income for their costs, and then the rest of the revenue will come back to us. So we're going to go to the market soon just to see who would be interested in doing that piece of work, talking through what the contracts would look like, and then hopefully get some progress in that in the next 12 months.
Councillor Williams.
The other day I was given a sheet of paper which pointed out all the fees that we paid to specialist advisors over the last 12 months, and it's staggering. So just coming to, I presume that all our charges are on our website, they're public. So every council in the country will have exactly the same. So do we need PricewaterhouseCoopers to tell us what Shropshire are charging? Can we not do this in-house and save ourselves a considerable amount of money?
Well, the piece of work is now done, and I think it's mainly around the capacity to do it, because they've been able to go out and do all the research for us, and then just provide that sort of narrative and comparison around as to why people are charging more and it's not just around the fees, it's around the efficiency and the cost of the service as well. So yes, we could have gone out and we could have done that research, and I could have Googled regulatory services and found out what they're doing, but the sort of narrative and the sort of the deeper information as to why they're charging what they do would have taken us a bit more time. So for us, it just makes more sense to get somebody to do that for us.
Okay, thank you. A couple of follow-ups from me. There seem to be rules around cost recovery and not making a profit out of delivering services as a council. For example, we have a significant net income that is derived from our car parking charges, but there are very sort of clear rules about the kind of how we're allowed to use that money, and it should be used to fund transport infrastructure and services which assist with the maintenance of the highway and that sort of thing. Historically, it's been very difficult to see clearly how the income generated relates to the services that it helps to support, both in a way that can give assurance to members that the money's being spent on the things that it ought to be spent on, and also say to external auditors or to members of the public who might be concerned to be assured about that, particularly seeing as car parking charges are very contentious, and everybody needs to be assured as to what the money's spent on, so that they feel it's worthwhile as a time, which many people do see it as being. So how are we proposing to handle that, and also how are we making sure that the income is looked after and managed separately from controlling the costs, so that we actually account for the way that the income is used in a way that meets with our governance framework and our delegations?
So you're right. Some areas, some are specified by legislation anyway, aren't they? So things like licensing, we can't make a profit on the income from our licensing fees, and in effect, you should reduce your fees if you're making a profit, unless you can show that it's offsetting the total charge of that. The way we present it in terms of highways, I'll need to double check on how it's presented in the accounts. But in theory, it sits all within my directorate, and so the cost of that, the income from those services would be aligned to net off the cost of providing those. But any breakdown in the details of that, I can provide for the next meeting.
I think that would be helpful, particularly because if we end up under recovering or under generating income, and that is being used to support the delivery of services through the public realm contract or whatever, we need to be able to rein back on those services to marry with the income that's being generated. Otherwise, we're going to end up with an overspend. If it's a surprise to you, we have 10 years ago, as well as doing the income and charging work, Scrutiny did do a piece of work on brown and temporary signage, in terms of making some recommendations for how those signs might be managed in the verge side, which might be worth reprising in terms of looking at how we take stuff forward. Also, under the public realm contract, some of the market towns have got licenses to cultivate on things like their roundabouts, which allow them then to license in exchange for advertising on the roundabouts, local businesses to actually pay for the planting and the grass cutting on those roundabouts. So again, I think it's going to be important that we understand what the arrangements are that are already out there, because they may curtail what the opportunities are for highways type advertising, if we're going to bring that in. So we need to work with the parishes and the market towns and the city, to make sure that we're not going to be cutting across arrangements that are already in place.
Yeah.
And finally, just a quick query. Do we charge for the kind of signage that goes up directing people to new housing developments and that sort of thing, where it's effectively, you know, sort of providing a direction to people wanting to buy houses?
I don't know the answer here, but I've had the same conversation elsewhere. I've been normally with those, if they're sort of those AA signs, that there are different rules as to what they're allowed to do and we cannot charge for, versus the ones where we should be charging and making sure they are removed, because some of them stay up for too many years after the development has been finished, and it's almost a free advert. But I can confirm that as well for you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Fagan.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, Councillor Crockett, were you indicating?
I have got some questions, but
Councillor Fagan
Okay.
and then Councillor Crockett.
So children's and adult services, they comprise a huge part, probably more than 2/3 of the council's service costs. And in 2011, PwC identified potential to improve income or reduce costs in both of those areas. So why are there no proposed projects coming forward in those areas in this report? Is the first question. And really, has this PwC assessment looked at these areas at all? And if not, why not?
They have, and I think it's probably one of the more challenging areas, because most of it will be the payment of payment for care services. So in effect, the amount that you can charge is the amount that it is, if you see what I mean. There's not much you can charge more than the actual cost of providing the service. Or if someone's having to pay us for a particular area of service as well. So they certainly reviewed all those for us. There weren't many that they said were out of line, because they will either be set by statute or they are sort of already within the sort of spot purchase of a service that we're providing for residents or in our work services. So they have done the piece of work, but there was nothing that they said. There are a few bits. And we know things like sort of home to school transport, some of those areas where we are looking at in terms of the cost of that service, but nothing specific in the sort of care services that jumped out that we were out of line.
Okay, thanks. I think probably one of the huge difficulties is that in effect we're paying out a huge amount for services that we can't actually deliver anymore, and I think that's potentially an issue. But obviously that hasn't come out. That wasn't part of what was looked at.
No, because again, it's sort of Councillor Williams' question around it. Is that third party spend almost in reverse? It's what we're paying others to provide the service for us, that's then recovered as part of somebody paying for that service. So it's slightly different to us just providing the service and residents or businesses paying us for that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Crockett.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ross. It's been an interesting comments and questions session so far. Thank you again for the slides. It's really good to get a visual on things. I can't believe you've been here 2 years. My goodness, where's that gone? But going back to the business cases that we've got 4 mentions of on this slide deck. Point 3 is about aligning parking charges, and I know we're on the above comparator average for that. But I do think in today's climate, economic climate and cost of living climate, we really have to be careful with that, because we're already stretching everybody, and we need to encourage people to come back into our city to shop, into our cities, into our towns to shop, because so much of that has now gone from personal visits to online shopping, etc. So I think we really need to be careful. Looking at advertising and the lottery options, I think advertising to me is a very grey area. We've already seen in Hereford that we've got these illuminated billboards up in the city, and I do find them, you know, distracting. Never mind the small ones that you see on the lampposts. But I think we've got to really be careful if and where we do any advertising. I think the lottery option could be a potential bonus. It's something that if people have the capacity to do, they can opt in. So that one I think is quite a positive thing. And just finally, really going to service costs. One of my big issues is with the planning side of the council. Not only do we have pre-application opportunities, which I would love to see some data on it, because as Councillor Town said, we need data so that we can look at these things. So pre-applications we do charge for, but I don't think we use them or they're used enough. Planning applications, yes, we get a lot of those, but we also get a lot of retrospective planning applications. And could there be an opportunity for those services to be incurring an additional cost so that we are not wasting officers' time, because we all know officers' time is expensive. And then the final thing on the planning side of it is about enforcement. And it really would be good to see how departments actually practice and how we are performance relating and performance challenging of those departments, and to see where those gaps for staff, etc. are. And I'm sure you're doing it, but you again on slide 48 we've got that building control, a few ancillary fees and charge opportunities exist and could be pursued. So it'd be interesting to see what sort of things that relates to. But yeah, it's can we, have we, but are there legal barriers to those increases of charges for our planning department?
And I think that there is a differential between planning. The government have recently reviewed all the fees and charges. They were due to be increased from April this year, and it didn't come in. And we'd actually built that into part of our savings proposals for this year. So that has actually put a bit of a pressure on the planning income for this year, because we thought there'd be a considerable increase in the fees there. That's still now due to be, they've said by the end of the year. We're not sure if it's calendar year or financial year. So we're waiting to see what that brings, and that will probably align some of those other things that, particularly to say sort of retrospective applications, whether you can charge differently for that. Obviously, the pre-app advice is an additional service, so in effect we can charge what's right to provide that service, and developers or agents will decide whether it's right for them to pay that or not. I do think we can do more on that. I think the balance there, we want to make sure that we are supportive to developers to get the advice that they need, but equally there's a sort of overstep in that in terms of how much it's costing to provide that service. That if you go into a professional agent outside of the council, you would pay for that fee the same as you would to the council. So we do need to consider that going forward. And I think some of the other things, like you say, I mean, parking charges is really important that we get that right across the board. It's that balance between people being able to travel by choice, whether it's by public transport or drive to where they need to get to. What we're looking at is whether there are any sort of gaps or dips in where we should charge and we haven't. So, for example, and this definitely isn't a policy decision. So I'll be not misquoted on it, but parking, on-street parking after a certain time in the city centre, is it at the right time when you charge to or from, and what would be the right thing? Goes back to what's right for the economy. You don't want people to think, actually, I'm not going to go into the city centre in the evening anymore if I have to pay for the parking. So how do you balance that out in terms of encouraging that sort of increased activity, but equally not everybody just driving into the city centre as well?
Thank you. And I don't know whether Rachel would be able to answer this one, because we do have numerous planning applications coming in all the time. And I just wondered if there's any way that once that planning application has been completed, as in building control have signed it off, is there any legal way that we can reassess that banding for that property? Because I know in my ward, houses and extensions have doubled the size of houses, but the band of that house stays the same.
In terms of the council tax.
Yes, sorry, the council tax banding.
Yeah, whether we notify the valuation office, but we can check whether the.
Yeah, I just wondered because, you know, a lot of people do extend their houses, don't they? And if it's significant enough to warrant a band change, would we be able to say, right, you're in this band now? I don't know, legally.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, because obviously if it's a new build, then the valuation office gets notified as soon as it's complete.
Yeah.
Extensions and sort of renovations, we'd have to check whether it's something that we send to the valuation office at that point, or whether it's another notification.
I don't know if I missed something, but the revaluation doesn't happen until.
No, we're looking until the valuations. So if it's not been sold,
Only when the house is sold, and people can get hit 20 years later with.
For an extension, if they've extended their property.
Yeah.
I've just had this in my ward, if somebody extends the property, it stays at the same council tax band until the property is sold. And then might be 20 years later that the property is sold. And I've recently had somebody who wasn't notified by their lawyer that actually the council tax was going to go up significantly due to a 20-year-old extension.
Oh my God. Sorry. But if we could have a little look at that one.
Yeah, so Joanne's right, so that even notifying the valuation office wouldn't change it if it's not sold at that point. It would just almost sit on the valuation list until that material thing happened.
There are lots of things wrong with council tax.
Yes, I know.
Okay, thank
That's
you,
it,
councillor
thank
Crockett. Councillor Scott, were you in?
I don't know, councillor Cole, are you a follow on from this question?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Councillor Cole then, and councillor Williams, then councillor Stark.
Mine is different.
the retrospective. I mean, unless there's a limit on it, you want to put in that to make them think twice. With retrospective, I mean, I'd like to see it doubled or tripled, because there's a lot going on in my ward where they're just getting on with it. Oh dear, we've got our retrospective. So it should be at a fee where it's cheaper for them to go for proper planning and make them do that than go for retrospective.
And that's why I asked if there are any legal barriers to restrain us on those important decisions.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
It's a different point.
Councillor Williams and then councillor Stark.
Let's come back to when you said about the charges for planning. Is that set by us or government?
By government.
By government, okay. So we're locked in, we can't. And as my colleague there about retrospective, is that also a locked in?
I'm going to double check that in terms of what we can charge for.
Thank you.
Councillor Stark.
Yes, it's been a very interesting discussion, but nobody's mentioned behavioural change. And if you remember, some of the issues we had in terms of trying to make people change to become more active in terms of the way they travel to city centres, we're really looking at what we could do in terms of charging to change those behaviours. I'm not asking a question of you, Ross, this is more for the committee, and we're looking at recommendations. I just find it surprising that we're just talking here about the commercialisation of services, about food recovery, and that may be right, Chair, I don't know, and the cabinet member isn't here to give us a steer on what the cabinet's views on it. But part of the reason for doing some of these changes is to change behaviour in line with our other policies that we might be wanting to promote, in line with the fact that we've declared a climate and ecological emergency here.
Yeah, indeed.
It's one of the things that it's not getting picked up in this discussion, which
Well,
may be right, but I think for a committee, we really do need to think about where we have some sort of recommendation says somewhere along the line that's got to come into the debate.
Okay. Well, I think we've touched on it in terms of some of the comments that councillor Crockett was making about how distracting signage can be, and that could be a negative behaviour change consequence of some of the advertising. Councillor Cole mentioning punitive charges for retrospective in order to try and derive good behaviour, how income and charging does align in policy terms with taking us in the direction that we want to go in. And, you know, maybe a recommendation would be that we'd like to understand that a little bit more when, you know, if you can come back on the 21st when Councillor Stoddart is here, to actually give us a feel for how what you're proposing to do fits in with that. Councillor Bott, I was just about to go through some recommendations. Councillor Bott,
no, I just wanted to add on to what Councillor Clark is saying, and I'm just mindful of the conversation that we had at the last Scrutiny Management Board. When I actually said, should we actually make things like the environment and community explicit in the way that we do this, rather than implicit in the discussions, and that they are embedded as each one comes up on its own merit. And I do support you in that, and it was, I think, that it's back on the table at the next meeting, something that we definitely need to think about, how we do tackle those bigger issues within the remit of how we manage our scrutiny work.
And Chair, it's a matter of transparency as well. If the executive decide to set it aside for whatever reason, because they go along with where we want full cost recovery here, I agree that it could help with behaviour change, but the priority is full cost recovery. Then that gives us a scrutiny a chance to challenge that, because we need to understand that as the thinking that's going on here. And that's my concern, that if you just keep it around, just talk about these fees and income sort of policy as about commercial recovery, then you miss that nuance in a big way.
well, I take your point, and I think some of the comments that Mr. Cook has made about how officers are considering and weighing in the balance some of the opportunities versus whether that's right for Herefordshire, I think is implicit in some of the analysis that's going on. But I think as far as deriving some assurance and being able to scrutinise that as part of the budget process, perhaps we could recommend that for the items that you're looking at building into the budget for 24-25, you could come back to the next meeting with a bit more detail about what those are specifically, and for those be clear about how those are relating to the policy framework and driving the right behaviours for ourselves and also for the community that we represent.
Because when we were presented with the capital programme at full council, we didn't have that analysis underneath it to explain why we were presented with the capital programme, the priorities, and not really, because some of the moves away in the capital programme seem to be moving away from, say, the community side of the county plan, for example, much more into the economic side of the county plan. It's just that we've got to be aware of that, so that when we actually scrutinise those parts of the budget, we have that opportunity to challenge those assumptions, if that's assumptions that we made.
Yeah, and I think, on that's one of the reasons why having the outline business cases to go along with not just new programmes, but also programmes to be removed or changed, to actually understand what the implications are of doing that in the context of the policy framework, is a reason why those business cases need to come alongside the changes that are being proposed, so that that's actually articulated explicitly. So if we could make a recommendation that we do hear more about the items that are going to be built into the 24-25 budget next time round, as far as income and charging is concerned, we get a bit more information on the quick wins versus the big wins that might be longer ropes to push, and what the priority order is of taking some of this forward. Clearly, this is a piece of work which is not going to be done in one bite. We're going to have to, there's going to be an ongoing programme, but really understanding what the first and second, maybe third tranches are of that, just to get that bigger timeline view of things. You said that PwC were asked not to look at consultancy offerings that we were already aware had the potential for development. So if you come back with could include what the plans are to develop those, and again the time frame in which we would be looking at piloting and taking those forward. Similarly, the service charges handbook, what the ambition is in terms of what we're expecting for the budget for the coming year, and what will then continue to be a work in progress. Really just to understand the priority framework for that. Could I propose that, because we've had parking charges for a long time now, and they do generate a large net income, that we actually have that as an example of how net income is linked to explicitly to the services that it supports, and how we maintain an understanding of that through in-year delivery, so that the two can be tied together in a way that have them, sort of hardwired, and that there is consideration given to options, particularly in the area of planning, for fees to drive positive behaviours in our community. We don't want Herefordshire to be the Wild West. We'd rather people were not, well, we're asking for permission rather than forgiveness. Because that's the rules. Members, and any other recommendations from the floor? Councillor Stark, then Councillor Cornthwaite.
It's just an observation, and it may be that it's covered. One of the issues, of course, is competing against private industry or private providers. If we expand our services that we offer beyond our statutory services, everything else, is there any danger, Ross, that we might start to impinge on private providers and start becoming almost a competitor to some of our businesses out there, and that could cause a negative reaction? I'm just asking the question. I'm not saying it's a recommendation yet, but I just wanted to know whether that was a danger.
There is, and I think we are mindful of that, and we don't want to step into areas where local enterprise and business might be already providing those services. Having said that, we would still be employing local people to provide that same service as well. So it would be competing in a market that we can do. So that I wouldn't see I wouldn't want us to be pushing others out of the market, but equally, I think we've got our own commercial sort of enterprise as well that we need to think about. So it's balancing that out really. What we don't want to be doing is things that isn't our core business. There are certain services that are quite rightly provided by local business, and that's the way it should be.
Do we want a recommendation around that about reassurance?
I think if we could just have a bit more information about how you manage that, and give assurance that public money is not being used to subsidise the delivery of services that compete with the commercial sector. Councillor Cornthwaite.
I wondered if it was possible that we could have that figure that PricewaterhouseCoopers charges, so we know what figure we've got to take by way of increased charges, so that it's clear that we just haven't paid a consultancy and we've paid all that money out, and we haven't actually made that money back in through their recommendations. So if we had that figure, we would know what we had to target. Would that?
Presumably we're taking a project management approach to this, so making sure that we recover the costs of the consultancy advice that we have received in, and what the payback period is going to be for that. Would that do in terms of providing some assurance that we were taking a business-like approach to the way we were delivering on this?
For me, would you?
Councillor Davis.
I just want to backtrack when we were talking about signage. Like, for example, were you thinking of charging for a sign to go on to the side of the road for with an arrow going across to say something's happening? The reason I'm asking is because Bromyard has got a bypass. Everybody's bypassing it. What I wouldn't want to see is that if we wanted to put a sign, as in our Christmas lights or our Sunday market, for us having to pay for that. Business has already been taken away from us because of the road. So, it's a comment I'm just making, please don't charge us.
They don't charge for advertising.
Not in Bromyard.
Yeah.
Anywhere else, yes, not in Bromyard.
I don't think we can make it. Bromyard is exceptional in all sorts of ways. I don't think we can make that kind of an exception.
Well, there aren't many bypasses elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, that wasn't what we were suggesting.
No, I know.
I
I just wanted to put Bromyard in there somewhere.
Yeah, but yeah, and if they've got ideas and sponsorship for signs, I mean that's the other thing we've looked at elsewhere is if you've got like the welcome to Bromyard signs, if they are sponsored by local businesses, that's another way of covering the cost of those things as well. But it's again, we can't have a free for all that everyone's suddenly putting up lots of signs.
I understand that.
To where they need to go.
Okay, right.
Thank
Well,
you,
I
Chair.
think we've given this a good airing. Thank you, committee. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Thank you, Rachel. You're sticking around for the next item. Yes, excellent. So we have some recommendations. Do we need to go through those, or is everybody clear on what those were? Are we happy? Are we happy with those? Okay. Yes, general approval. Okay. Committee consents to those. Thank you.
We have no comfort break.
Right. Do we need a comfort break?
Well, I think so.
5 minutes. Okay, it's 15:45 now. I think 5 minutes might be ambitious. Let's say 15:55. Excellent. Thank you very much, and welcome back to the Scrutiny Management Board. We are now at item 9 on the agenda, which is taking a look at the proposed approach to budget consultation. And I'd like to welcome members of Impact who've been working with the council for a number of years now. So they know us quite well and have been doing giving us support and delivering consultation for some time. And Rachel Holt is with us again. Thank you, Rachel, from the finance team. So we've got a report and a couple of appendices here. But Rachel, would you like to introduce this and identify key points and bring Impact in as you feel necessary? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper provides some background information onto the possible options for the consultation with the public as part of the 24-25 budget process, how we might engage with the public, and gives you as Scrutiny Management Board an opportunity to influence and make some recommendations about that approach. For some background information, last year as part of the setting of the 23-24 budget, we hosted with Impact 14 events with the public, and that reached an audience of 428 members of the public. In addition to that, through the council's intelligence unit, we also hosted an online survey, and that attracted responses from 243 participants, 71% of whom had not previously participated in an online survey, so they were new
participants last year. So the paper outlines the why do we engage with the public and the benefits of different types of approach. And as the chair mentioned, I have the team from Impact who've successfully delivered those public engagement events for us over the past couple of years.
Oh, longer than that, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think actually 2012 was the first time that we did a consultation exercise for you, and then we had it again, and then came back in 2019.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you for the report and for the appendices. We have developed some lines of inquiry which we've shared with officers. Hopefully that will assist in the answering questions and the debate on the committee. Vice Chair, you're going to start us off.
Yeah, thank you for the lines of inquiry. So I've got number 1 here, which is very much building on what Rachel has said about why are we consulting and what's the point. So maybe thinking about the legal requirements as regards the council to consult publicly on its budget. You know, why do we consult? Do we have to? And I noticed you've got reference to the new conversations, the LGA guide to engagement document as well, which very much sets out the guiding principles, which I presume that's what you're alluding to. And it sets a context of being the proposals must still be at a formative stage. There is sufficient information to give intelligent consideration. There is adequate time for consideration and response. And conscientious consideration must be given to the consultation responses. So, so one of the first things is this a legal requirement? Is it something that we're doing to add value? So what are the reasons why the council makes an effort to do a consultation with the public, stakeholders, as opposed to an engagement? And then I've got a couple of other questions after that.
I'll take a few of those first. So in terms of why do we engage, I think it's a really great opportunity for us to go and consult with residents, understand their needs and priorities, and then we can use those, officers and members can use those to inform the budget setting principles for the forthcoming financial year. Obviously that relies on, as you say, quality of information that we consult on and the data and the assumptions behind that. And what's really important is the timing of when we consult to enable that to be considered, the results of any consultation to be considered and reflected in the budget that's presented to council.
Thank you. And so following on from that, then, when we did the consultation, what was the level of engagement that was achieved with the members of the public and the parish councils and the representatives, businesses and hard to reach groups in 2023 and 24, if you got that?
So,
and was it better or worse than 22 to 23?
Appendix 1 to the report pack shows the 14 events that were held in 23 in respect to the 23-24 budget. They were held in December last year, November and December, and a total of 428 members of the public were reached, and the listing on that appendix shows the number per event. With the maximum number, there were 60 participants engaged with at Hereford Sixth Form, 30 across a family event. That the listing is included there. For comparison, in 22-23, I think it's important to note that you know, over the past few years, that there's not a specific trend, largely because of the pandemic and the way that the public chose or were restricted in their ability to come out, and we were restricted in our ability to engage. But for comparison, across 14 events in 22-23, 3 events were cancelled because there were no participants booked on.
a further event, nobody turned up at, and across the remaining 10 events, 51 people attended. So there's quite a stark difference between those years, but I don't think we're comparing apples with apples across those periods.
So do you have any insight into what might have contributed to those differences?
Yeah. So the first year, so the consultation we did in 21, which was for the 22-23 budget, was all online. And I just think it felt so difficult engaging people in that way online. So at the time, I think we were just about to have new restrictions in terms of any face-to-face contact. So the decision was made to do all the consultation online. And it didn't work. You know, that's the best way of putting it, really. It wasn't successful. We had some good conversations, but as you can see, the level of engagement it wasn't good at all. So that's why the decision was taken next time to go back out and do the road shows. So the figure that you haven't had is that in 2019, pre-COVID, when we did the road shows, we engaged just over 1,000 in the same way. So the thing I would just highlight, sorry, is this okay for me to say this now, in terms of those road shows, is that 428 may not sound a lot, but those are 428 individual one-to-one interactions. So some of those people we were talking to 15, 20 minutes. And it was never really less than 5 minutes. So it's quite an in-depth interaction. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's real value to doing the road shows. I think there's value to online, but not in the way that we did it in 2021. I think that's where, you know, it might work now well, for example, with the community partnership, where you've got already engaged organisations and it's an alternative to going and having some space at their meeting. So I think it can work and there's a place for it, but I wouldn't recommend doing it that way again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stark. Oh, Councillor.
Well, if you was up first, that's fine. Were you up first?
Yeah,
Well,
I'm just going to go on to the next line of inquiry, so if you've got, that's all.
Can I just follow on
Yeah,
from that last comment? Thank you, Chair. So I was just wondering, when people see you face to face, is there an option for them to take a form away and fill it in at home?
There hasn't been. I don't think we've done that, Max.
No, if people wanted time to consider their response and do it in, we give them a leaflet to go onto the online survey.
Yeah.
That's where the online comes.
Yeah,
in.
so
Okay, thank you.
it's the same questions. And I think last year it was a little bit later that they were able to give their response to the online survey, but we were able to highlight it and publicise it during those face-to-face engagements.
And would there be any value in, rather than going online to do it, that they had an option for somebody to call in, and then you, although you're not face to face, you've still got a voice that can just go through the questions and make it simple?
There could be. I mean, the thing to say about the online, we don't replicate exactly the online survey on the stands. So that some of the themes will be synced so that we're getting feedback, you know, consistent feedback, but it's a slightly different approach we take on the stand. So it's more kind of high level, you know, would you rather do this or that? Do you agree with this? Yes, no. Whereas the online survey tends to be a bit more detailed. But I think that would be a good option. And, you know, we're constantly hearing, and I know this is very difficult for public services, about the difficulties that some people have in accessing anything but consultation online. So I think anything that gives people a person to speak to is going to be a good thing.
I only know it in the reverse, is that I'm asked so often, I'll get a phone call at work and go through all the things with somebody on there.
Yes.
And it's so much easier than if they said, go online and fill this in, because I probably never would.
No, that's right.
But I would do it when I can speak to someone.
Yes, yeah. So I think last year, through the survey, there was about 250 responses. So that's in addition to the 428 that we speak to face to face. So for some people, that will always be the preferred option because it's quick. It's, you know, it doesn't need the interaction, but they work quite well as long as we can sync them in terms of the questions and the themes. I think they work quite well together.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Stark.
Yes, I'll answer the first question myself. Since I've been one of the ones that have been raising the issue around the level of response we get for each budget, and particularly the trend is downwards. I mean, leaving aside COVID, and you know, back before COVID, we used to get a higher level of engagement than we seem to be getting now. So when you talk about setting up the engagement program this year and how you're going to reach out to people, have you changed it in any way because of what happened in 22, 23 and 23, 24?
Well, we would see last year as being quite a successful engagement for the, you know, because we were still kind of, COVID was still a bit fresher in people's minds. So, but we have changed it this year, and this wasn't on the appendix in your document, but in the proposal that we wrote to Andrew Lovegrove and Rachel, we included this about doing some kind of online Q&A. So not a consultation session as such, but using social media, exploring ways of doing that. So, you know, just exploring, doing something different this year. People really like the face-to-face interaction, and, you know, we get a lot of thank yous. We get negative as well, of course, you know, why hasn't this been done? The potholes are dreadful and why can't we have a bypass? We always get those questions, but generally people like the face-to-face and the, you know, it's great that Herefordshire Council are coming out and we can actually, it raises your profile. So that's, I think, there's not always, there's an argument for doing something different if you think what you're doing, you know, isn't working. But I think there's real value to the roadshows. But on top of that, we wanted to trial some kind of consultation using social media this time, and the online survey, of course.
Just before I go beyond that, you could take a sampled target approach and send questionnaires out to a target set of residents out there. Have we ever considered that? Or is that too costly or what?
Yeah, I don't think that's, I mean, that's something would probably be a question for the intelligence unit rather than us.
The intelligence unit.
But it would, sorry, Max.
And they do use that approach for they use that approach for the quality of life survey. So it is used, just not specifically for the budget.
It's just, we could think about that as a recommendation rather than going through the meeting. Perhaps something we might want to suggest in terms of an approach for the future. But following on from that, there must be factors that are limiting the level of engagement in the budget. Is cost one? Are we not spending enough yet? Or is it something else beyond cost?
I think marketing is a key one. And I think because, again, you know, we will be doing these events quite late this year.
Right.
So the first one we're proposing is at the end of November. Well, we're on the 10th, no, we're on the 7th today. You need a longer lead-in time for marketing and promotion. So that's something that we would really, you know, but when we were very successful in 2019, there was a lot of marketing that happened, you know, in terms of we will be here, you know, on such and such a date, come and give your views. And we did have people turn up saying, I've seen that you were going to be here today and I wanted to come and you know, see what the consultation was all about. Mm-hmm. So I think that is a key thing.
And any reason why that hasn't happened this year then?
I think it's about lead-in time.
It's just lead-in time. Yeah. Change of administration probably as well, yes. Okay, right. So when we talk about changes that have been made to the consultation process this year, is there more accent on face-to-face, or is it the same sort of proportion as it was in 23, 24?
Currently, it's about the same.
It's about the same.
Last year. However, I have seen in the lines of inquiry document about doing more with harder to reach or seldom heard groups, and we are very, very open to doing that. Again, it's just about making sure that we have the time to engage those groups, but because of other consultation work that we've done for the council, last year we did consultation on the health and wellbeing strategy. We've got, and we've both got kind of experience of working in Hereford. We've got those contacts that we can tap into to try to access those groups. So we'd be very open to expanding and doing more to reach those seldom heard groups.
Would you think that the committee should be looking at making a recommendation along those lines about the lead-in times and marketing, about learning from other consultation process exercises that have gone on within the council? Would you find that useful?
Very. Yeah, I think
that's a couple
really
of very helpful recommendations there that we've talked about, which I'm quite happy for the committee to pick that up. Because my problem here is that one of the key issues for a council is to set a budget. And one of the continuous problems we have is we're not getting engagement with the council on that particular issue. We do get great engagement elsewhere, but we don't seem to get engagement where we really do need it in terms of when we're coming to making big decisions about people's tax. And that just seems to me something we've got to try and tackle in the future.
We get very mixed views when we talk to people about it. So some people say that's what the council's there for, to make the decision. And they're kind of happy for those decisions to be made on their behalf. Other times, I think it's quite good to have some high level priorities where you can take a temperature reading, but when it comes down to actually deciding, how budget is going to be allocated, people like the detail. And I think that's where we've fallen down in previous years. Last year, we had a much more detailed approach than previous years, and it was really welcomed. People liked the detail.
That was for the 23-24 budget.
And there was a lot of people saying, oh, it's great that we've got, because we were actually able to give the proposed level of, how much money was going to be saved by altering a service, what percentage of the overall saving that was, and people liked that. So I think detail is good. It doesn't work for everybody, and I think there's still a place for those high level temperature reading type questions. But if you really want people's input, into the budget, I think that detail is important. And that's where the type of events we held in 2012 could work really well. So when we did the consultation in 2019, sorry if I'm talking too much, but when we did the consultation in 2019, we had a phase 1 and a phase 2 approach. So we went out to the public and we said, what are your kind of feelings on 4 or 5, I can't remember exactly how many key priorities. And then we used that to do a phase 2 consultation where we then gave people a lot more detail. And so that worked very well. Both of those were roadshow type events, but I don't think you'd have time to do a phase 2 in this budget setting cycle now. But in the future, I think that would be something to aim for. Have your kind of temperature reading, you're going out to the public. It's good for profile, it's good for that broader engagement. But then when it comes to actually engaging people at a real meaningful level over where their council tax is going to be spent, then give them the detail. And and that, I think probably events could work well for that.
Please, thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Yeah, and having been sat on the other side of the table for this last year, it is really difficult with the timescales that the council and officers have to work to in terms of the lack of certainty. To provide the detail, you have to have the certainty, and a lot of that comes really late on in the process. So getting that 2-phase approach in terms of doing some sort of big handful type, what are the priorities, what are the issues, what services are important, scene setting stuff that you don't necessarily have to have the detail for that, because that's about what people consider important, what they value, what kind of services they touch them and their families. That could be done earlier on in the year, and then inform what sort of detail then comes back later on. But it's down to timing, it's down to resources, it's down to actually making the funding available to enable that sort of a consultation to take place and valuing it. And I think one of the reasons for asking, what's the point, is not to say, imply there is no point, but also to say this is something that as a council we choose to do. And actually the only statutory consultees are businesses who don't pay council tax at all. But for some reason, the law says we have to consult with businesses on the council tax. But there you go. So we do this for lots of good reasons and for transparency and public engagement and all the rest of it. COVID's been a real struggle, and there are maybe lessons to learn from going through that and coming out the other side, but also maybe reprising some of the ways in which we consulted a few years ago and building the best of that back into how we do things now and for the future. So, Councillor Williams.
Can we not, have you not thought about doing this telephone? Ringing people, like we all get it virtually every day. Is that not a more efficient way of actually approaching people?
There's a couple. Yeah, I mean, I can answer that. Cost implication obviously is involved with that. It's much more expensive to have that one-on-one phone call to do that. And it's also about GDPR. Do we have those phone numbers to ring them up? Have they given us permission to ring them and ask them those questions?
Yeah.
We very rarely get that because people don't obviously always want telephone surveys. So no, which is time. No, which is very true. Whereas actually, if you're just there available for people to come and talk if they want to, people are a lot more receptive and go, actually, I do have the time. I do want to share my views.
Okay.
And I would definitely say that through the roadshow, we have definitely spoken to people that would not have engaged with the consultation otherwise. It feels you're talking to people when they're out doing their shopping, on the way to the dentist or whatever they're doing, but it's a very easy way for them to engage. That means they don't have to, sit on the telephone for 5-10 minutes or whatever. But
Councillor Cole.
Have I got it wrong then? You just said that it's only businesses you go out to, not the general public.
No, the legal requirement is to consult with businesses on the council tax of the budget.
Yeah, so this survey would only be with businesses?
No, we do. The council consults with the public.
Yeah.
It is not a legal requirement.
Right.
The minimum requirement is that you consult with businesses.
I see.
Which is odd, given that they don't actually pay. But following on from some of those comments about what's worked well previously, Councillor Chowns.
Thanks. Yeah, we've already covered, I think, quite a lot about around this, but a bit of follow-up, I suppose. I mean, my understanding is, and this was before my time, that the best ever consultation that we've had in terms of numbers was 2015 on the MTFS. And that was face-to-face meetings in all of the market towns in Hereford. The ward councillors were involved in kind of, encouraging people to come along and so forth. I mean, beyond what you've already said about learning lessons from the past, is there anything, further you can comment on with regard to that? I mean, that consultation process lasted much longer, and we've been talking about the difficulty of the tight time frame we had from government. But it's just, I mean, I've been around for a few years now, and it just sort of strikes me that we know that government is going to give us the figures very last minute. And maybe we need to be kind of building in planning for how we can consult better next year rather than just thinking about this year now. So what lessons can we learn from 2015 that we can apply in 2024 maybe? In terms of mobilise, I've got a few follow-ups, but just any comments on that so far?
Well, definitely the key is timescales.
Mm.
So, you know, if you, I think you'd probably need to start it in the summer and then have it, particularly if you're going to try to get the engagement with parish and town councils who are very open to being engaged. Their frustration is always they're not engaged early enough.
Mm.
So what they would like to be is be engaged so that they can go back and have one of their meetings, take the consultation to their meeting, have discussion and come back with a considered view. But we don't seem to manage to get that right, which is a shame and a bit of a missed opportunity in a way. So I think the key is about doing it earlier. And then we can, you know, engage parish and town councils, other community organisations, there's the community partnership, you know, there's the infrastructure is there, I think, to reach a lot of communities. You've still got to think about your second and third groups who wouldn't necessarily be engaged with those. But, you know, the infrastructure is there, but you need the time to do it.
I'd really like us to make a recommendation around this. I think it's really key. You know, internally we start the budget thinking about process in about July, don't we? Sort of 9 months in advance. Maybe we just need to start it a month earlier so that we also start the consultation. And again, this sort of thing of there's maybe two layers of it. There's the broad brush. These are the projections. This is the likely financial settlement. These are the kind of bits that are in play. Sorry, I'm into, you know, and there'll be another opportunity in kind of late December to say anything specific on more specific proposals, but I'd really like us to pick that up. A couple of other things, just to picking up on what you've been saying so far. I mean, on the mechanisms of consultation, I agree that face-to-face is really important. I'm currently running a series of 31 meetings in village halls all over North Herefordshire, and it is really, really time consuming, but also really, really valuable because that one-to-one opportunity is really important. And I wonder if we could just push ourselves a little bit more to do a bit more of that. And perhaps if we have more time and perhaps through existing structures, like you're saying, parish councils and existing organisations and so forth, recognising there's an additional hard to reach issue, but I think there is more potential for us to use existing structures, whether that's parish councils or kind of other informal community groups of all sorts. We've got a whole network of talk community events, for example. You know, they are, and many of them are actively reaching hard to reach populations. So yeah, just a bit more effort on that. And I think it also needs effort to reach out to the potential audience in advance to say, we are going to be here at this point, come along. And again, even if we can't send a letter to everybody or deliver leaflets by hand to everybody, maybe there's a way that we can do that. The second thing is about sort of interactivity and the educational opportunity of the budget. I mean, it still stuns me really that many people, I mean, it's not stunning really, because it's only when you become a councillor that you get really kind of into the weeds of the budget. But many ordinary people, understandably, don't really kind of get the division between revenue and capital budgets, for example. Some councillors even struggle with it. You know, many residents don't know that we basically spend about 2/3 of our money on, you know, provision of social care services that are largely statutory responsibilities. You know, residents think, I'm paying my council tax to have my bin collected and the potholes fixed, and really don't realise that it's actually quite a small proportion of funding that is available to spend on those things. So I feel that there's a very big sort of, education really isn't the right word, but sort of, you know, information sharing opportunity with the budget consultation that we're still not adequately taking. You know, we do have documents on the website that I've pointed residents to, but I'm visualising some sort of, you could have a sort of 1-minute video that says, you know, did you know 5 key facts about the budget? And it kind of does that stuff about what is, and it's literally a 1-minute video. And then it's let's ask you, what do you think are the priorities for, you know, social services and capital budgets? And then you can go into more detail so that there's an opportunity to literally watch a 1-minute video and then give some level of input, and you can go deeper and deeper and deeper into the weeds if you want to. and that would obviously be on social media, but I think that would be really useful and might generate conversation and a bit more organic community engagement as well. And then just my final thing is picking up on Louise's point about kind of random sampling, essentially, which is what we did with the climate assembly, and that was very successful in kind of, can we elaborate on that or develop on that in some way? You know, I don't know, right to 1,000 out of, you know, Herefordshire's 85,000 households. So, you know, we specially selected you randomly to be part of our budget consultation. We'd really appreciate it if you do X, Y, Z, you know, as your kind of contribution to the community good.
So on the last point, the barrier would be GDPR, but what we do have is the wider sample that we selected. I said we selected, where the sample for the community assembly was randomly selected from. So that was about 600 addresses who gave their consent to be contacted again. So we have got that as a sample, which would be so that we could use that. And we have talked about doing that, haven't we, Max? So in terms of the information, I think that's a really good point. We do that every year. So we have pie charts and we've had pull-up banners before where, you know, the till receipt. Yeah, we've had the till receipt on a pull-up banner where people can see where their council tax is being allocated to. And also that figure about, I can't remember the term you used, sorry, Rachel, but designated and undesignated funding. That's not the right term, obviously.
Restricted and unrestricted.
That's the one, restricted and unrestricted funding. So, and it's always really shocking to people that, you know, the unrestricted is such a small piece of the pie. So I think that just needs to keep happening and keep happening and keep happening. Because when we go out and do the roadshows this year, we'll be talking to an entirely new, you know, there'll be very few people that we've spoken to before. So again, you know, it's just about drip, 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 I think, with these things, and just keep giving people those bits of information. But I really like the idea of a video. I think we've done that before for the online survey, but it was, I think it was the chief executive did a short video, which that was in 2019.
I'm thinking more like a cartoon thing or an image thing that will get shared on
socials.
socials.
That's a great idea.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I know that's a bit different to, you know, an officer speaking, but yeah, I think that's really
yeah, I think man in front of pie chart, possibly not, but you know,
yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really helpful suggestion.
Yeah, if all that came to every parish council and they put on a bit of a show, like they do with their public meetings in May, that'd be a real good job. You get some responses in from every parish council, wouldn't you? No?
Well, yes, I mean, we have done the parish summit before. I think last year the problem was that the timings weren't right.
No.
So we weren't able to come along to a parish summit. But when we did the consultation in 2013 or 12, we had a lot of engagement with parish and town council.
So how do we get the timing right then?
Well, I think it's about starting it a lot earlier.
Yeah.
And doing that.
So that's that
first.
recommendation. Lovely.
I think it is really important to engage with parish councils because if members of the public struggle to engage with the budget, it's not everybody's cup of tea. Parish councils know their communities, and if they are consulted, you know, we need to get it right, because I know sometimes parish councils have felt that, you know, they're going to be blamed. You know, if they, you know, what they say will then be used against them. Oh, well, you know, you said you wanted cuts here or cuts there. No, that's not how we've got to do it. But if we can engage with them and have them representing their view of their community's priorities, then if we can't get to the individuals, we can get to the lowest level of local government that represents and understands those communities. And I like very much the idea of making a point of asking people for their permission to get back to them, because over time we'll build a larger and larger body of contacts that we can go back to, and there will be a longitudinal element there of their engagement on something that will help them build a knowledge and understanding of, as well as us be able to get repeat inputs from people who have actually taken the trouble to engage. So yeah, that's really useful. Councillor Cornthwaite.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So last year, the consultation was considered late, starting on the 23rd of November. And this year it's starting on the 22nd of November. So it's still obviously late if it was late last year. So if you could tell us why this is, and what is being done to mitigate the impact of this consultation coinciding with the pre-Christmas period. Although I can see sometimes that's an advantage because you're getting people out on the Christmas markets. How is the proposed consultation going to be made meaningful in terms of offering the people you've interviewed a genuine opportunity to influence the budget priorities? And how do you propose to demonstrate this to the public so that maybe we on the door can ask people? And if it's not too many questions, I would suggest with relating to parish councils that could go back as early as June to get it onto a parish council agenda, which might then not be until it could get as far as September before they've actually got it onto their agenda. Because I realise you propose it and then it's put way forward, and we want that as early as possible. But relating to businesses, because I'm keen you do engage with businesses, they may not pay council tax, but they do pay business rates. And so there's quite an income from them there. And I don't know, it said that last year you did a Zoom session, which I'm not sure that would ever work for me at all. But maybe an invite to somewhere on Scarland Park or somewhere else where businesses could be encouraged. You may have to have an incentive. They may need some biscuits on the side. Who knows? Sorry, that was a joke. But anyway, I am keen that you engage with businesses and get some of their input into that to see what they can do, and who knows.
Yeah. Okay,
okay.
I'll take some of those questions, Chair, with your permission. So in terms of the business event, we will consider with Impact the best way to do that, timing permitting, of course. Just to address the timing, we are in a really challenging financial climate nationally. All councils are in a different position from that they've been in previous years. And that means the challenge in setting the budget becomes harder. So I think it's a really valuable option that we separate and do 2 stages of that approach in future years to consult on some high-level options, some themes, before we have then prepared the detailed savings proposals to go out to engage with the public in more detail. And that's the challenge in terms of the budget setting process. We're working very hard at the moment to understand the in-year pressures, to use reliable and timely activity data to inform the budget setting for 24-25, and to work through officers, corporate directors and cabinet members to identify opportunities for additional income generation, to identify areas for savings, and the culmination of that process will result in the detailed options that we then use as that really great material that Sarah talked about. The public like having that detail to consult on. At the moment, we haven't finalised some of those options because of the scale of the financial challenges. But as soon as we have, we will endeavour to prepare some valuable, meaningful background information to share with members of the public that we can then take out to those events. Unfortunately, that means that where we are in the year at the moment, that will coincide with the late November, December. But I think in previous years, we noticed that, public are generally out and about in the market towns over that period. And we had good engagement in previous years. The report that went to council as part of the budget setting report in February included a report from Impact that talked about the positive engagement from members of the public during that time.
Councillor Stark.
Yeah, I'm conscious of time, Chair, because we've got another meeting here at 5:30. But I was just struck by that point, Rachel. I read a CCN report, County Council Network. We shouldn't use abbreviations, I know that, because somebody might be listening. County Council Network.
Thank you.
County councils are facing a pressure of about 690 million, of which 393 million is children's services. That's useful context for any part of the public that we're engaging. If we're just talking about Herefordshire alone, I know it's valuable, but that's a sort of statistic that I would want to know about, so that when I'm looking at the Herefordshire budget and when I'm maybe concerned about the amount of money that's been put in children's services or whatever the issue is, I've got that wider picture. Oh, hold on, the whole county council network is suffering here. And I just wonder how much background information we do give when we do the budget.
We did include background information in the material last year, and that's definitely something that we would seek to include again when we
You will,
go out to
because
consider.
I think
Absolutely,
that's
to set that national context
Yeah.
and the pressures that aren't just unique to.
Well, it's
Herefordshire.
picking up
Yeah.
your point about
Absolutely.
that, yeah.
I mean, there are some points that are unique to Herefordshire, particularly our sparsity and rurality.
Yeah, I'm not saying that.
But having that national context is really important, so that people don't think that, the problem is with the council as opposed to the funding of local government.
And this is county council, so that is part of our sort of group as well.
Yeah.
Sarah.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to go. I don't think I'm being rude, but my daughter will be stood on the side of a country road waiting for me.
I know.
So I will have to go, but it's been really good to come and discuss all this with you. So thank you for giving us the opportunity. I just wanted to say one more thing, and that was last year, the events that we held were very poorly attended by officers and members. And I think that makes a huge difference. If people can come out and talk to either the officer or the member, it just makes it's like that, just having that human interaction and being able to talk through some of those difficult issues, that you're just making people aware that, that the council are having to make these difficult decisions, I think really helps in terms of informing the public.
Well, that's really helpful, and I can vouch for that. It was a struggle to get engagement with ward members to actually come out and be part of these consultations in their communities. Yes, they were being held in the market towns, but those market towns were also serving the rural hinterlands. So ward members in the rural parishes around the market towns do really also need to feel that they own those market town consultations and get involved. I'm happy for us to be recommending the scrutiny that that is something that is impressed upon all councillors, and hopefully officers will be similarly encouraged. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thanks, Max.
Sorry, thank you.
That's been really great. Right, we are under a time pressure, and well, I just want to say that we're going to be handling the work programmes differently, so that we can really focus on this as an agenda item with the time that we have available to us. Councillor Hamlin.
I think Rachel will be able to handle my quick query. Do we have any information on how the data and information that is collected during the all that we've been talking about for the last half an hour or an hour? How do we collect this information, and to what use do we put it?
So the team from Impact, part of their scope of work is to not just undertake the public consultation, but to prepare some insight and analysis of the engagement. A report is provided as part of the budget setting pack that goes to full council in February. And in that budget report, we also outline how the results of that consultation have influenced changes to the budget. Similarly, for the online consultation, the online survey, a report is prepared by the council's intelligence unit. And again, that outlines the demographics of the participants and the preferred options. And we outline then how the results and the options that members of the public have chosen to support or not support have been reflected in the budget that's proposed to full council.
Okay, so we'll get to see that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Councillor Fading.
Yeah, I think it's the issue about the parish councils and the community groups, and I can, you know, I've heard that basically if we had more time, that leading, we would be able to engage with those groups better. And I think, you know, the fact is that it's absolutely crucial that we do engage with parish councils properly, because they are the first level of government. They understand how these services are impacted by the need to save costs, etc. So I'm just also very conscious that on the sheet where parish councils are going to be consulted, it's not actually even confirmed yet, and I think that in terms of timescales, that potentially we will lose even more parish councils, and so I think somehow we need to prioritise getting the view from parish councils and using the talk community hubs to actually engage with the process. And I'm just sort of really finding the question is, why are we not committing to undertake consultation with parish councils this year? And I think what I've heard is that is about the timings, that the lead-in time hasn't enabled that. But you know, can we make that a priority?
Absolutely. I think the proposal that you have in front of you today is a high-level first draft out. These are the options that are available to us as a council in terms of that public engagement. I think that the team at Impact have already highlighted that a session, a series of events with parish councils would be valuable, and hearing the feedback in the room, that's definitely something that I think will probably form part of your recommendations today for us to prioritise and ensure that those events take place within the time frame that's allowed, considering the different media that we could use to do that, such as a video or an in-person presentation.
Yeah, I think given the report and the appendices that we've got, it hasn't actually given a feel for the options. It's sort of looks like it's going to just be the market town consultations, and you know, it's quite limited. We're not going to have the online survey that we've had in previous years. We're not necessarily going to be. There's no mention of social media. There was a query over whether the parish councils are going to be engaged. If the consultation approach is sufficiently plastic to be able to accommodate the things that we've done in previous years, and this is a really, you know, just sort of outlining a timetable of consultations physically present in the market towns. I think that's really positive, because you know, I certainly was quite concerned looking at the paperwork that we had in the agenda pack, that there was a lot that was missing compared to what I know we've done in previous years. But you know, it seems like the whole approach to the consultation is still being worked through, and I think some of the issues to do with timing and starting earlier, you know, it would be really great if we took a multi-year kind of project management approach to looking at budget consultations. So we were identifying when the talk parish kind of presentations are planned, so that we can actually be asking parish clerks, as a matter of course, to be placing on their council agendas, you know, the engagement with the county over budgeting at a time that suits them, to enable them to take into account what might be service sharing or, you know, sort of service take up in their own budgeting processes, you know, Lengthsman scheme, P3 schemes, those sorts of things that, you know, if they only meet every couple of months, the very rural parishes, it's a real struggle if they're not building engagement with the county into how they are structuring their own agendas across the whole year. And I think if we start to embed that kind of request with them, that they always timetable, that they're thinking about engaging with the county on budget issues, and we have that early, you know, top level, you know, sort of thematic type engagement, June, July, early September, then, that will enable us to set a scene that we can then come back with real detail for people who want it. But it will enable our community groups, talk community, our third sector organisations to align their own priorities, budgets, themes, engagements with the council in a way that is positive, which everybody seems to be struggling with at the moment. So I think taking the multi-year project management approach to doing this and using the council networks and sort of communication channels is really important.
So that's our recommendation, is that?
I'd be happy to propose that as a recommendation if people are happy with that. Councillor Stark?
Could you add funding to that as well, that recommendation? Because if we're serious about budget consultation, it costs money. And let's not beat about the bush here. If you don't spend money on consultation, you get poor results. So that's one of the key issues. And I think this is such a key area for us to get as right as possible, Rachel, that we should be willing to, as a committee, say the funding needs to be found to do it.
Yeah, I think the thing is, creating a budget for the budget consultation is making a cost explicit. Quite a lot of headless chickening, running around, trying to make it work, trying to pull information together by other means, takes up officer time in other ways that isn't necessarily made visible and explicit. And I think understanding the importance and priority of actually properly budgeting and funding this work may well take some of the effort out of other bits of the process that might make it overall a more lean and efficient way of doing things.
So another recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Properly funding it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, I think some of the lines of inquiry we've actually covered in the things that we talked about. So communication and engagement via social media and online surveys. I think that is an important part of how we want to continue to do things over and above the face-to-face stuff that's in the appendices. But Pauline, you were wanting to talk about hard to reach groups.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As we all should know, there is a requirement for us to engage with hard to reach and people with protected characteristics. So those two specific groups. The information that we received only mentions the sixth form college and the South Y engagement. Are these the only planned engagements with these hard to reach groups? I know you're not going to be able to answer this, but if we can take this back to impact, and how does this comply with the requirement to engage with the equality duty for this council? And more importantly, what I would like to see is for impact to identify more specifics to ensure compliance.
Thank you. And I think impact in their response earlier when we covered some of this, acknowledged that they had already identified some additional opportunities for us to engage with different groups through the network and through the channels that the council already have available. So I will work with impact before we finalise the proposals to make sure that we have increased our engagement in those areas where we need to.
I think it's another perhaps missed opportunity is going through Talk Parish, which is the new parish council summit area, and also the community partnership network. And I know Max attends those meetings as part of her role. But I would like to recommend that a clear consultation plan is drawn up so that we can be assured that those hard to reach groups and those with protected characteristics do have their say.
Yeah, we'll take that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any follow-ups? No. Okay, right. I'll take the last one, which is really looking at Appendix 2, which has got the community engagement paper, and an item, the last item on that is really indicating the kind of things that Scrutiny needs to be looking at as part of scrutinising this as an engagement activity. And there are 7 points in that listing for Scrutiny to be thinking about. And in the lines of inquiry that we followed in today's meeting, we've explored points 1 and 2, which are about ensuring that proposals are being consulted on, are still at a formative stage, and that the approach and the methods used are appropriate given the scale and nature of the issue. But what we haven't got is the information that we would need to be assured on point 3, that sufficient information during the consultation process is given to give intelligent consideration of the issues. And I think, you know, that's because you haven't got the questions sorted. And so I don't know what the timescale is that you're working to on that, but our next meeting is 21st of November, and 22nd, I think, is when the first Market Town consultation is expected. So it must be very imminent. So given that we haven't had that information, I'd like to propose that we do get sight of the question framework that is going to be used for the budget consultation, and that is provided for information to the committee as part of the agenda pack that's put together for the 21st of November. If that's possible. I know that the agenda pack has to go out about a week beforehand. So if there are issues to do with that, if you can let officers know. Point 4 is saying that there's adequate time given for consideration and response. Now, the face-to-face consultations are very much in the moment. So having an online questionnaire and having the kind of engagement that allows parishes to be able to consider their own position and the context of the questions they're being asked by the county is quite important. Now, it may be because of the timing this year that is difficult to achieve for the parishes, but certainly having that online consultation for people to fill out in their own time and come back to will be an important part of making sure that people do have time to consider and respond to the sorts of questions that we're going to put to them. So on that one, on point 4, are recommending that a web-based public consultation questionnaire is provided, and that there is a suitable duration, if it can't be the 6 weeks, sufficient time for people to be able to engage with that and have a think about it as part of the consultation process would give us assurance on that point. As far as points 5 and point 6 are concerned, which are about conscientious consideration given to the consultation responses, I think as a committee we're going to have to wait until we see what the report is that impact and officers bring back to us when we are scrutinising the draft budget, and that information will, as a matter of course, be provided to us at that point. But then we can make a judgment about whether consideration has been given and maybe changes made to what's being proposed as a consequence of the feedback that has been received through the budget consultation. And at point 6, the findings of the consultation and subsequent decisions fed back to the public. Well, that will be made public as part of our deliberations. So by default, that point will be satisfied when we look at the draft budget. Point 7, though, is that the views of those that don't normally engage with the consultation process are looked at. And again, that's really about making sure that we get to those hard to reach groups and we use Impact's network and our own network and communication channels to make that happen. And I think that's such an important point that, again, if it's possible to have something back for the 21st meeting that we have, that that firms up on what the approach is that's going to be taken to getting to those hard to reach and quality impact groups. I think that will be an important thing for us to be assured of at the front end of the consultation process. Any comments from committee members on that? No, I think okay. Points I've been noting during the debate, point was raised about targeting questionnaires for budget consultation. We talked about random sampling and whether that might play a part in future consultations, not necessarily this year, and also to enable people to self-select by giving permission for them to be contacted in future years about budget consultations is an important part of building a longitudinal engagement across more than just one year's cycle.
Yeah. That's additional to what else we might do. It's not just about putting all our eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
It's about a range of engagement that
Yes.
we're talking about here. So it's just an add-on to what else we might do.
Yeah.
Face-to-face and everything else. I think we should make that clear when we're
yes, that looking at those other ways of increasing engagement and getting people to be involved across multiple years, would like officers to think about that as part of future processes. We've touched on starting earlier, and that being part of a multi-year project management approach, and having a peer consultation plan. That'll be part of coming back on the 21st with something that gives us assurance about hard to reach and quality impact groups. Has anybody got anything else that they've noted during Councillor Starr?
There was the contextual information you provide on the budget. Should just be Herefordshire based. It should give at least the county council network context, because I think that's really important. So people don't think we're an outlier here.
Yeah, I think it's county and unitary authorities, ones that have similar breadth of responsibility and service delivery. Councillor Fagan.
Chair, and a note actually discussing the till receipt, etc. When I tried to find any evidence of that for this year's council tax, I couldn't actually find that on the internet. So I think having that sort of making that sure that sort of information is accessible and available is important in that context as well.
I mean, I quite like the till receipt, but the decision was for this financial year, so it's taken last year, that we wouldn't use the till receipt again. I found it a way of kind of making the budget kind of real for people. We did have a schematic which tried to break down how the 1 month's council tax payment for a Band D property broke down against all the different service areas as sort of fractional costs. I think maybe I'd like to take that point and suggest that what we have is, some meaningful graphics, graphic representations of the budget, because not everybody's a spreadsheet and a sort of a list type person, and seeing things in pictures or pies or other ways of representing the data, it is helpful in relating what we're doing as a council to people's real world experience of managing budgets for themselves.
And you'll be reassured to know that it's not the accountants who design
that information. Andrew and I won't be sat with our pens and notepads, or certainly with a spreadsheet. It will be something that is, you know, run through the people that have expertise in this, in knowing what works with the public, in terms of the different forms that we can use.
And I think we're really fortunate with the intelligence team to have people who, you know, are experienced at providing graphic representations of quite complex data sets. And, you know, getting that information across in you know, creative and engaging ways. So I'd encourage,
Like cakes.
that's it. I'd encourage officers to think about how to do that.
No, I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
No, pie shop. Okay.
Yeah.
And bake.
Right.
Yes.
With the children.
So with that, is the committee content with, do we need to run back through those recommendations?
I think we're okay with them if you're happy with what you've just gone through.
Okay, right. Thank you, everybody. That's been a really useful piece of work, I think. And thank you, Rachel, for sticking with us on that. Right. So that was agenda item 9. Agenda item 10 is the Scrutiny Committee work programmes. Now, I'm conscious that it's gone 5 o'clock now, and what I would like to suggest for committee to consider is that we open up agenda item 10 to enable Councillor Fagan to make a request in terms of Children's Scrutiny Committee to Scrutiny Management Board on a piece of work that that we're going to be asked to consider undertaking, but then to suggest that the Scrutiny Committee work programmes are dealt with in a workshop, and that we bring back recommendations from that workshop to the committee to approve, rather than going through them in the room now. They have been published as part of the agenda pack. They're in the public domain, but I think it's probably going to be best for us to deal with it in a workshop format. We can deal with the cross-cutting issues and anything else that needs dealing with, and that will also enable us then to look at our own work programme on the 21st, taking the input from that workshop into account. Are you content with that as an approach?
Yeah. If you can find the time for the workshop.
Chair, if I might. I'm proposing that we organise that sometime in December.
December for the workshop.
December, that's
okay.
right, in order to report that back to the January meeting.
Okay, right. We'll give ourselves a bit more time.
Yeah, I think so, because November's really.
It's far too busy.
It's
completely unspeakable, so let's keep it real.
Good. Okay, that's a sensible way forward. You know, I'll just open up agenda item 10 then. Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the issue that the Children's Scrutiny Committee is concerned about is the impact of the budget pressures, and particularly the children's service impact on the budget, because we know that we're facing an overspend, and we know that a considerable chunk of that overspend comes from children's services. So we have a meeting next week, 14th of November, where we look at the SEND action plan and child and adolescent mental health service. And then in January, we were going to be looking at workforce issues, fostering adoption and sufficiency plan, and the school's capital strategy. So within our work programme, we actually haven't got the capacity to build in a proper scrutiny of the pressures on the budget. So coming to the management board to say, actually, is there capacity for the scrutiny management board to actually do a piece of work which actually looks at the proposed overspend, the forecast overspend, and specifically at the pressures that children's services are putting on that on the budget.
Okay, thank you. Well, I mean, the overspend that is coming out of children's is creating a threat to the whole council's finances. And we are simply unsighted presently on what the additional ask is going to be from the directorate for additional funding from reserves to continue its improvement journey. But just looking at the in-year budget delivery, we've got over £13.5 million worth of overspend compared to budget that was forecast at Q1. So, you know, given that our responsibility is to look at the budget, if we can't look at the whole budget because of the timing issues and so forth in right now, I'm very happy for to take that request and to look at how we might look both at the issues and pressures to do within your delivery, and also what the directorate is doing in preparing for its budget for next year in terms of how it's building its understanding of pressures and, you know, savings opportunities, just to make sure that we have a budget that's put together for this directorate that is robust, because the knock-on effects for the rest of the council having to, you know, tighten its belt and not deliver in the way that officers had planned is really tough, and we can't keep doing it.
Madam Chair, can we not actually have one of our sessions? Because this is one of the big problems. Okay, you're right, and it's not just Herefordshire, it's all across the country. Whether any county or is dealing with it and getting, you know, and sorting it out, but we just can't go on throwing money at this problem, because this problem is only getting very marginally better. Do you think we ought to really some time and really look at this and try and find out what the problem is?
I do think it's important to take some time over this, but I'm not necessarily sure that having a public committee meeting is the way to deal with that. That maybe having a task and finish group which does some work, or a spotlight review, but maybe a task and finish group, because it may be that there's more of a sort of a journey that needs to be taken on this. We set a task and finish group up to actually do some in-depth work looking at in-year delivery and preparation of the budget figures. And then that group puts a report to this committee that we then look at in a public meeting, and that would allow that deep dive to take place, an intense piece of work to be undertaken, taking on a lot more detail than we could deal with in the room here, but then we get a report that we can investigate and ask questions about and get some support from officers in looking at. And I think that approach might get us further than trying to do it in the room together.
I agree with you that it ought not to be done this in depth, ought not to be done in public. No, I think it ought to be done amongst, you know, the members, but it really does need doing, because nobody's coming up with much of a solution. Hard as they're ever destroying.
Okay, Councillor Stark, you were indicating.
I'm just thinking, what's the outcome of this that we're trying to achieve? I've already said that 319 million of the pressures out of 690 million is the stark reality that we're facing across all county councils. We can do a bit of in-depth study, but if we don't get the terms of reference right, then the outcome might not appear in terms of what we want to achieve. I'm just wondering, what are we going to actually achieve here? Are we going to be saying to the council, stop, don't invest any more money in children's
Well,
services or
let's,
what?
let's take some advice from a scrutiny officer.
I would be very surprised if the directorate hadn't got at least an understanding of what those pressures are.
Right.
So I think they have probably a very clear sense of those. And in that regard, I think that merits accountability. Obviously, there's always a balance between candour and public accountability and transparency. So how I would propose you make sure that you're on the right side of that balance is twofold. I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Stark, in terms of reference is crucial for this. And so what I would propose to you as a committee is that we table terms of reference to the meeting of the 21st of November. That doesn't stop us planning, you know, because I think this is a piece of work that will need to happen at pace. So we'll carry on planning it whilst at the same time creating the terms of reference for you. Then obviously the accountability comes following that task and finish group process, when you report the work that you've done, the people you've spoken to, the evidence you've considered, and the recommendations that you'd like to make, which you then also bring back to a future meeting of the committee. So then the public will be fully cognizant of what you've done, why you've done it, how you've gone about it, and the conclusions that you've made, whilst at the same time providing a private arena where you officers and yourselves can perhaps be a little more candid than you would be in a public environment. And that is a perfectly valid part of the scrutiny process. Not everything has to happen in public.
And can we actually get the officers we would like, or
I would remind you again.
Not demand or command, but
Absolutely.
can we actually get them to question?
I would remind you of your powers to ask of any information.
Okay, so I think quite honestly with this problem, I think there's a lot of fresh faces on this council. And I think if a lot of us fresh faces looked at this, we might see a way, you know, I've heard lots of different things and there's a lot of things that could be sorted, but it's not something that we can, Herefordshire can sort on their own. It's a case of, you know, we're taking children, aren't we, from God knows where, and our children are going the same place. So there's many, many things that could be sorted, but it's a natural problem.
So what I can assure you is that we've obviously, this hasn't come as a complete surprise to Rachel here. We have been liaising with officers around this, so you won't be pushing a closed door on this, put it that way.
Okay, that's good.
I think we wait to see terms of reference, Chair.
Yeah.
I would like to see that first, because I think that's crucial in understanding what the task and finish group is going to bring to this. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, well, I mean, from my point of view, having, you know, sitting this side of the scrutiny fence now and having sat at cabinet side last year, reducing the risk to the delivery of a balanced budget by making sure that the pressures are understood and that the savings are both realistic and profiled to match a reasonable delivery is going to be really important. And I think if we can help to reduce the risk of having large overspends forecast for a third year running at Q1 from this directorate, I think that would be, you know, a good outcome from any work that we do.
Value for money comes into it as well. I mean, I've raised this issue time and time again. Are we getting value for money from the investment maintenance improvement board? And shortly, when we come together at 5:30, I'll be raising the very clear criticism from Ofsted that the improvement plan is not being delivered in the way it should, despite all this. So it's not just about the amount of money it's going into it. Are we actually getting value for money? And I think that's going to be part of the terms of reference, Chair. Thank you.
That needs, as you say, needs to be added to the terms.
It has
of
to be
reference.
added to terms, and that's why terms of reference is so important, in order to then understand what exactly we're going to deliver.
But that's the two-part thing as well, isn't it? I mean, once we've got a draft terms of reference, then we'll be able to flesh out whether those issues that you're talking about have been incorporated, whether there's stuff that needs to be added, whether there's stuff that maybe doesn't need to be there. And then I think that's a conversation that we can have once we've got the draft.
And if you read the latest Ofsted letter, I've got concerns, and that is clearly not happening. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, right, well, we'll have we have terms of reference back to us in a fortnight, and in parallel with that, working
Or
up.
share with us in advance if you want, Dan.
It'll have to come formally to the committee in a
No, but we can
fortnight,
look at it
yeah.
informally if you want, and maybe give us any.
Yeah, yeah, well, we need to do several iterations on it, so we're happy with it
Okay.
in order to approve it on the 21st. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, right, with that then, we will deal with the rest of the item 10 in a workshop, and we will defer making any decisions about our own work programme for the same reasons. Next meeting is 21st of November, 2 p.m. here at Plough Lane, despite whatever mod.gov might tell us. We're going to be here.
I thought I'd gone back in time.
So with that, at 17:19, we'll close the meeting.